is attending via Alexa. Todd Dwyer, that's me, I'm here. Bob Pease?
Here.
Katie Childs?
Present.
Carl Luck?
Here.
Ken Jones?
Yes.
And Jack Rabbit is absent tonight. Any announcements from the commission?
I don't have any at the moment.
Nothing.
Bob?
I can't wait till the end of the meeting.
All right. Any announcements or comments from the public? All right. With that, we're going to come to our first appointment. We have Scott Pitta and David Price with the Drone Consultant Group, who've been nice enough to come and tell us about the services they provide and educate us a little bit on what drones can do for communities.
Cool. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm David Price, and this is Scott. I think what we're...
Not have our backs to...
I was saying, what I'll do is probably give you guys my best side, and I'll sit in the chair, that way I'm close to the arrow key, and then I can face most people.
David,
Yes.
can you guys share the microphone back and forth so we can capture this for
Yes.
people at home can hear you?
There we go.
Sure. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Scott Pitta and I, a couple of years ago, became very interested in the use of drones for government use. Scott is a former pilot for MedFlight and had a terrifying incident carrying a patient to a hospital up in Boston where while he was trying to land the helicopter, a recreational drone pilot was trying to land their drone on the same helipad to get their really cool footage. So that led to Scott and I, both with a passion for aviation education and a new interest in drones, to start to develop the applications for police, fire, emergency services, and for agriculture and for conservation as well. As I said, we are both passionate about teaching. We've written what we think is a very good textbook that helps a lot of our students. We specialize in training, but we also do provide drone services. And we work pretty hard for a lot of our clients, most of whom are located here in Massachusetts. We do have some New Hampshire clients and some clients also down in Virginia. We've also in the last few years become pretty strongly connected to the industry for drones. We work with a civil engineering firm, Greenman Peterson, UMass Amherst for some research, insurance carriers. Both Scott and I became licensed using thermal cameras last November, which means that we're licensed thermographers, which is very useful for wetland assessments and for energy assessments on buildings. And I think what I want to do tonight is actually just do a quick show and tell on the different types of drones that we have, starting with the drone that's, you probably haven't even noticed that it's sitting in the room. It's the smallest one. This drone is a newer development, and it's called, this hopefully it won't roll up. This actually is called a Mavic. It's a very tiny drone, and actually it does look like a toy, but this drone is where the other drones were just a few years ago. This drone is capable of flying in the air for about 30 or so minutes. It can get a very high resolution of imagery, and it can also be used for law enforcement if they wished to actually keep it in their glove box of their cruiser, and they could go out during an accident, and they could actually map out what an accident scene looks like for a CAD file to make a 3D model for a court case. The next type of drone, which is the one that's sort of in the center of the room, is called a Phantom 4 Pro. This is actually the workhorse drone right now. It's used for a lot of ortho mapping, and I'll talk about orthos in just a few minutes. But this is the one that I use almost every single day of the week, mapping some of the projects that you can see rolled out on these long photos. Scott, you want to talk about this?
Sure. This one here is sort of it's the Inspire. David has the Inspire 2 up there. That's the big brother to the white aircraft in the back here, the Inspire 1. The Inspire 1 itself is actually I call it the UH-1 of the drone fleet. It is the utility aircraft. It's been around for several years, lots of spare parts, and it's your lowest entry point that you'll be able to get into with a detachable camera. This one we have mounted with the thermal camera. So you have a $2,000 drone with a $15,000 camera underneath of it. But you can put anything from a $200 regular camera under there all the way up to the high-end thermal camera, zoom lenses if you want to see something from a good distance off. We were down in Plymouth the other day and we were reading license plates on cars in a parking lot a mile away. So it's a significant zoom feature. But before I really get into the aircraft, I do want to say one thing, because we are really, talking about municipality use of drones. And anytime you get into the use of government use of drones, I always say one thing. The very first thing you need to do as a community is get the community involved. Because you say the word drones, and some people are like, oh wow, that's really cool. Other people, oh my lord, no. And then you have the ACLU showing up, and it's just press, and it becomes a nightmare. It's much easier if you start off and say, look at all these things that we can do. And David's going to go over some of the applications that'll show you how this new technology can save you time and money and resources. And it's just a tremendous investment. It's the newest way of doing things. But before you get into that and into that discussion, you need to have a discussion amongst yourselves as the citizens of Lunenburg as far as how are we going to structure our program. And that's where David and I, where our company comes in, is we help cities and towns and government agencies, federal agencies, state agencies, develop those SOPs and those programs.
Thanks. Good job. This is the last drone, which we didn't bring with us today. It's a common drone used for a lot of different applications. It can be used for all year round. It can fly in cold weather. It can fly in light rain. Because it has a thermal camera and a visual camera as well, you can actually toggle and make survey maps or do conservation land assessments with it. So these are some of the things that you can do with for conservation assessment. You can always assess terrain. You can do a wetlands assessment, boundary control, wildlife protection, energy assessment of town buildings, looking at windows and roofs, agriculture and irrigation assessment, as well as weed control. The imagery that you're seeing on the right-hand side is actually not a thermal image. It's called a normalized difference vegetation index. It's a near thermal image that's actually capable of being captured with any of the drones on the table that are using a regular, inexpensive camera. A camera that's not much more sophisticated than what's in a Sony CyberShot type camera that you'd keep in your car or in a backpack. Every picture you're going to see in this presentation is actually something that I've done, a project that I've worked on, so none of this is just taken off of the internet. What you're seeing on the right-hand side is something that I think is similar to conservation areas. This is a cranberry bog owned by UMass Amherst. It's called Cranberry Station, and the reason why the color of the bog is so vibrant green is because those are good high-resolution images taken from the white drone that's right here on the table, the same aircraft. And the neat part is, I can then take those photographs that I've stitched together and make it look like something like this, a normalized difference vegetation index. What we're working on with UMass Amherst is their ability to actually take the colors that you see in that near thermal image and correlate those to the health of the different cranberries. Obviously, well, what you don't realize is that with the software, and the software looks a little bit like what you're seeing on the left-hand side of this screen, and actually, more importantly, on the left-hand side of this screen, is actually the ability to tweak the palette, adjust the spectrum to get the results that you're looking for. So if you were to look at a wetland area or anything where water and land are coming into contact, this is going to give you a spectacular ability to actually take the measurements that you need. And I'm talking about measurements in terms of height, 3D modeling, and if you look at the lower left-hand screen, you'll see distance and area and volumetrics as well. So this is the part that gets strange for people, is that you have a drone that's taking flat, downward photographs, and yet when you stitch them together, you are making 3D models with it. And with that, you can actually do volumetrics. This is a qualitative assessment of elevation, but like I said, you can use topographical lines. And the way the drone works is if you look at this still image that I've made, these are all those flat plates are the downward-facing JPEG photographs. Just like the pictures that you take on your phone in JPEG, when you go to your desktop computer at home and you click on properties, if you click on properties and click on details and scroll down in these pictures, you'll actually see when you scroll down what's called a geotag. It's the latitude, longitude, and height of the photo. So in these posters that you have on the table and the the cranberry bog that you have here, those are basically a few hundred photographs, and because they all have a lat long and height or an address, we can actually line all those pictures together. So what you're seeing there is a bunch of photographs, and then in this slide here, if I can hit play on this, sometimes I have a little bit of a delay when it starts. What you're seeing there are two grid lines. I did 2 3-minute flights at a quarry not far from where I live, and these are all the still JPEG photographs that were taken. And while they look flat now, what happens is we stitch them together, and then it becomes a 3D CAD model. And that essentially can be rotated, and then all you have to do was, with the swipe of your mouse, slice off the earth. And I call this an ugly pile because it's not symmetrical, so it's difficult to get the exact volume of it. We capture the volume of this pile of dirt to an accuracy of about 99.97%, and that's not using survey ground control points with the GPS. So we sliced off the earth, and that's what you see there. That's the ugly pile of gravel.
Now, David, how long did that take you on scene at the time?
About 15 minutes. They're about 3-minute flights. And this is a small acreage. The bottom poster, which is kind of sticking out, is a 2-mile corridor of highway that I did in about a half of a day. And in that half a day, I did, I think, around 280 acres from a height of 250 feet. Using that same flat imagery, you can actually create what's called a fly-through. So if you need to show something with the conservation land, you can actually have this type of a movie. And this is, again, not a video. These are all still photographs. And I apologize for being a little bit on the jerky side, but I think you get the gist. This is Salem, New Hampshire. It used Rockingham horse racing track, and right at the top is the start of the track. I'll just go to the next slide. Winter is done, I think, but snow is a big issue. This fascinated both Scott and I. One of the students that we taught is the ski making manager at a ski slope in Massachusetts, and using a drone that's similar to the Phantom, but his actually was, believe it or not, lower quality. He was able to use his drone using a thermal camera to look at the relative thickness of the snow. So I put that for simplicity. Bright is warmer, dark is colder. So that pretty lavender is where the snow is deeper because it's colder. Obviously a building, you're seeing the energy that's coming off of the building. This is under thermal spectrum only. This is not the visual spectrum that we see. I think I have a transformer from a power line in the foreground someplace. Where this gets really cool, you see the transformer? See the heat coming off of that? So obviously, if a town had a drone like the Inspire 1 with a thermal camera, you could fly this around all the areas of the town where there's a concern. That looks like fire, and that is snow coming out of the snow machines. And my favorite little clip is coming up in just a minute, where you're going to see a Snowcat go down the mountain and plow the snow right here. You can see the heat coming out of the windshield, and you can see the windshield wipers going back and forth. And right about here, this is jerky on my computer right now, it looks like a lava flow. But what this person does is he actually directs the people to make snow in certain parts based on the color that he's seeing from the thermal camera.
David,
so,
can you back the video up to that, where you had the snow guns?
I might not be able to. I don't want to mess up my, yeah, I might not. It might be too tricky.
No, I just wanted to point out, some of you may have seen that the first scene there with the snow guns. If you saw on the left-hand side in the tree line, there was a little yellow dot. That was a person. If you have a missing person, you send up that drone with the thermal camera, they won't be missing for long. We've had several of our clients have gone up and they've done some tests with it, and they say, okay, you go out and try and hide in the woods. They just show up. Yeah, you're just looking for that temperature differential of the body heat, and you find them. Missing people, missing dogs. I found a missing Jack Russell Terrier with a search group. The dog was missing for, what was it, 9 days? 9 days. It was 9 days in the winter, out in the woods, and they had teams of volunteers tromping through the woods. Nobody found the dog. Show up on scene with that drone with the thermal camera. 90 minutes later, we were walking out of the woods with the dog in hand. So I always tell people to think of the humanitarian value of that, but if you really need to sell it to the municipal leaders, think of the actuarial value of that versus having, your fire department, your police department, all of those resources out there. So that's just another nice little thing that these things can do.
Good job. Next, I think maybe if you were reading this, these are the different applications that Scott and I have helped towns for using drones with emergency services. In addition to missing people and dogs, fire support and coordination, wildlife mapping. I talked about car accidents, roof snow assessment. And for that, I have this. This is a boat fire in Quincy, Massachusetts. It's a remarkable clip. Hopefully it won't stay too jerky. When the firemen got to this scene, they didn't have any water gear on, so they had about 200 pounds or however heavy their gear was, and they actually thought this was just one boat fire. But because the drone was launched over the scene, it wasn't one boat fire, but it actually was 4 boats, 3 that you see there and 1 under the smoke, and actually the pier itself was compromised. So as soon as the fire chief saw this, he had the crew come back and get refitted. And in just a minute, you're going to see the next clip, which is a building fire. And I'll stop on the building fire when I see it. And actually, I'll do an intro for it when it comes up.
You might have to skip some of these.
Yeah. The building fire was also in Quincy, Massachusetts, where people thought that they were getting, in the back, they thought they were getting hit by parts of the roof. There was a fire crew in the back with water hose and a fire crew in the front. And it's because they were at the wrong angles that the crew in the back was getting hit. So by putting the drone over the fire chief could have the people move out of the way. Let's see. Give it 2 more. Maybe it just won't come up. So, for construction projects, I do a lot of inspections of bridges and buildings, and it stresses me out. I actually wear a heart rate monitor when I do bridges. They're not my friend, but I've done bridges, buildings, high mast power lights, power lines, and of course we've talked about survey mapping already. So finally, public use. And I think what I'd like to do is pass this back to Scott, and he'll talk about the different ways. I've got 107 and color, and that's it.
Okay. So, obviously, the Mavic down the end, the Phantom, the white Phantom over here, these are aircraft you can go to Best Buy and you can purchase them. Some of the bigger hobby shops, you can get the Inspire and some of the larger aircraft. And one of the issues that a lot of municipalities are running into is, hey chief, I just got this toy for Christmas. I love it, it's great. Hey, let's use it. We can use it to help fight the fires. Chief says, hey, that's great. Let's do that. There's one problem with that. The FAA sees that as an aircraft. Anything over 0.55 pounds being used for anything other than just purely recreational use, flying around in your own time in your backyard, whether you're a volunteer or you're an employee, is non-hobbyist use, and that is an aircraft being operated in the National Airspace System. Because of that, it must be registered, and the operator must have some type of certification. And there are 2 different ways that you can be certified as a government agency. One is you can go under what they call Federal Aviation Regulation Part 107, and you actually get a remote pilot certificate. It looks like a pilot's license. It looks like any of the other pilot licenses in my wallet. It just says remote pilot on it. That allows you to operate during the day, outside of controlled airspace with a whole bunch of restrictions, and you're very tightly controlled on how you can operate. We don't recommend that for government use. What we recommend is there's a little carve-out hidden in the federal regs that allows government agencies to create their own airline. and it's called a Public Use Certificate of Authorization. Essentially, you are showing the FAA, hey, we have an equivalent level of safety by using this training program, this safety program, these SOPs, and we're going to have, these tests, and you set up the entire process as if you were a real airline, which is what David and I do. We create that process for you, we do the training, we handle all of that. And then when that comes through, we submit all of that to the FAA, they approve it, then you are your own airline. You are a public certificate of authorization operator. The benefit to that is you can now operate at night. You can operate over people for emergency purposes. So if you have a fire, if you have somebody missing out in the woods, if it's a life-saving mission, you can overfly people. So you get a lot more leeway with that public use COA. And if there's anything else that you want to do that you may not have immediate authorization to do, if there's an airspace issue or something that pops up, you get a 1-800 number that's dedicated to government agencies where you call the FAA and you say, hey, I know the president is down the street and the airspace is all locked down, but we have a missing person, we need authorization to fly. And they'll say, okay, tell us what you want to do, where you're going to be. They'll talk to the Secret Service, and then they'll get you. It takes about 30 minutes. So it's a nice little carve-out. David's signaling, he's moving the slides along.
No.
Yeah.
No, not for that reason.
Guys, we have about 2-3 more minutes.
Yep.
We have
Okay.
one more.
Perfect.
All right. Big issue that some municipalities are finding out now. The fines for this are roughly $25,000 per violation if you don't have some type of authorization to fly these. And this is not per flight, this is per violation. So like, if there's a high-speed chase, when they finally catch the guy, they get him for every time he drifted outside of the lanes and didn't use his blinker, every stop sign that he ran, every speeding violation, all of those things add up. So $25,000 for operating an aircraft in the National Airspace System without a license, operating an unregistered aircraft, operating at night, operating over people, you name it, it adds up pretty quick. So
that's it. We wanted to say thank you. Do you have any questions? Drones are still relatively new to people.
Yeah, I have a question. One of the things that is interesting is the ability to map wetlands and so forth, whether it be infrared or whichever technology.
Yeah.
Is that something, I don't envision us getting a license or doing all those things. Is that something that can be contracted for if we identify an area?
Yeah, and that's a smart question. I'm always pleased when people say, look, it's not our skill set, but we know that we can use the technology from a drone. So the answer to that is absolutely yes. Scott and I, we know civil engineering companies that can take this software, these images, and stitch them to whatever level that you want. So that's yes.
And what are the, one thing people are very concerned about, I think you mentioned, privacy and these things. If you contracted somebody who has all the right licenses, and we wanted to, get a baseline for certain wetland areas, is that, do you need special permits or releases from the people whose land you're surveying? Or
it really depends on how invasive what's happened. And the top photo that you have there is in Situate, Mass. So we notified all the people that lived in those homes. There's going to be a drone flying over your house at some point this weekend during low tide, and I droned it. Because you're using the drone for positive reasons, it really has not been an issue for us at all. Yeah, and I emphasize that.
to get to the crux of the question, there is no requirement because it is an aircraft being operated in the National Airspace System. That's public land. That's like driving down the street. But as a matter of practice, just being a good neighbor, absolutely, we always, we make ourselves known, we notify when we can, we wear high visibility vests. It's sort of the industry standard that you let people know that you're there.
Right. Yeah, it sounds sort of like where you started, is make sure people are aware of what's going on first and educate them so that they're not scared, and
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
be courteous and notify people.
And not stop over someone's house.
Yes. and-
Transient good, stopping not so good.
Right, and it really comes down to some communities have anti-voyeurism laws and those sorts of things on the books, so it depends on the purpose of the use.
Good, thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, I have one other one.
Okay.
Have you ever, I see the cranberry bogs and things, we have a lot of lake people here tonight and on the agenda. Is there any application to use it for, lake management, can it look into a lake and there's a lot of vegetation in there and do anything?
So that's still a new field. Scott and I both have experience using the Phantom-type drone with polarized lenses and looking into the water. I live in Duxbury, Massachusetts, down by Plymouth, and I've droned a few of the marinas, and flying straight down, I was able to see essentially where the silt was. The Army Corps of Engineers just cleaned out the Duxbury Bay, and the silt sort of came back in. I was able to put together an ortho and show that to the town manager. So that's a good application. I think a lake, I haven't done a lake, so I'm scared to make a promise, but it's certainly more still water, so it should be better. How deep is the water?
We have lakes that are 10, 12, 15 feet.
Less than 20 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, it probably would be a good application. It's worth trying out at least anyway.
Where they're really useful is with flood zone mapping. Because you can take that, you throw out some ground control points, the elevation of those points, then from there you can do an ortho mosaic like you see on the table here and add contour lines to it. You get a much more accurate end product. As far as looking into a lake with a thermal camera, water is thermally opaque, so you will not see anything beneath the water with the thermal camera, anything less than maybe a quarter of an inch.
It's visible. All right, thank you.
That's great. Any other questions? All right, David, Scott, thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Second, we'll clean up.
All right.
Thank you.
My wife a Phantom 4 for Christmas a year and a half ago. It's still in the box.
I put the smaller one, I put the Spark. It's pretty awesome. What do we have for the LSIC? I'm debating whether we should go to that. It could be a while.
These pretty quick. Yep. The rule is you have to stay within line of sight, so line of sight gets subjective for some people, but my comfort level is about 2,500 feet.
Keys to see and avoid other aircraft.
Who's done it?
We're going to hold the LSIC meeting till right after the hearing, so you'll be the first thing after our hearings. Okay, Joanna? Did you hear that?
Rich, can you hear it better now? I just moved.
We're going to hold your appointment till right after the hearings. Okay?
Rich, can you hear it better now?
I don't think he's on.
Okay, I just moved it on the table.
All right, we're going to open our first hearing pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, as amended, and the Town of Lunenburg Wetland Protections and Municipal Bylaws. A public meeting on a request for determination by Martha McDonald for the construction of a single-family home and driveway within the buffer zone at 221 Goodrich Street. Ms. McDonald, please come forward.
There's 7 hearings?
And why don't you pull your chair up and tell us what you're going to be doing?
There's 7 hearings?
Not everyone's here, Joanna. They'll go quick.
You're gonna have 3 of them continued, 2 of them because the applicants have the flu, and 1 that needed to reschedule. So you only have 2.
We only have 2.
Okay, I have
Could you pull the
this
microphone?
mic here.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Martha McDonald, 221 Goodrich Street, and I have subdivided my existing parcel of 10.75 acres. I created a house lot, which I have an approved house lot.
Yep.
A 2-acre house lot. And so that has all been done, and I've gone in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals on an issue. I am using the existing driveway, so I'm not really, there's really no new driveway. The existing driveway will be used, and so the new house is essentially here, and on this diagram there, as opposed to where I currently live up on this part of the property. And so as a result of the Zoning Board of Appeals review, the Conservation Commission requested me to appear at this meeting, but I'm not entirely sure what it is you would like me to explain beyond what that is what I'm
Actually, I can
doing.
explain that.
Yeah, what I don't see on here, Matt, is...
Well, this is the map that you and I had gone over the Saturday we did site inspections last. What you have is you have a wetland on the other side of the street, and when I measured it from this plan right here and I scaled it out based on what I had in the field, this part of the area right here is the outer part of the buffer zone. And that's it. Everything else
So we
is
just have
well
some
out of the
minor
buffer zone.
grading
So you have some
just
minor
within the
grading.
100-foot boundary.
That's why I asked them to file the determination instead of a notice of intent.
Okay.
You've got the stone wall, the road, another stone wall, and then the pond.
This map may give you a better idea of where
Yeah.
there's, the new house will essentially be right in
Over
this
here.
area, right at that cart path. And that's where it is in relation to the street and the pond.
Yep.
So the wetland's on the other side of a street, and there's a paved street in the middle.
Yes. And there's...
It's in technical jurisdiction, so I wanted to get her in for the negative determination just to get her off the books.
And we have existing stone walls that line the roadway.
Looks like on both sides.
On both
Yeah.
sides of the roadway.
Definitely.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? No. Any questions from the public? I'll entertain a motion for a -3 determination. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Very good. That's your plan, correct, ma'am?
This is,
For the file?
I don't know if it's in there or not. Let me see if you have a small copy in there.
that was your document, not mine.
Correct.
The Zoning Board of Appeals, they have this
They have
as
that already.
part of their package.
All right, cool.
If you,
Yeah, we don't have it.
Yeah, I have the ZBA's package, Mrs. McDonald.
Oh, you
You're
do?
all set now, you're good to go.
you don't need this, that's
Okay.
yours to keep.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
So just a point, in the file, Matt, so if we go into the file, we'll see where the wetland is, because I don't know how we would know what we just approved.
There's one of the sketches that she had a sketch that was not in this file.
Yeah, I have the ZBA file in another section. I don't keep them
Oh, okay.
together. I'm gonna
So
put
it'll
them
show
together
where-
right off the documents, but yeah.
Great.
All right,
Thank you.
very good. Matt, 307 Townsend Harbor Road, are they here tonight?
No, they had asked for a continuance.
All right. We have to open the meeting to continue. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, as amended in the Town of Lunenburg Wetlands Protection and Municipal Bylaws. Public meeting for request determination by Marley and Ryan Dixon for construction of a sandy beach at 307 Townsend Harbor Road. The applicant has requested a continuance. I'll accept a motion for a continuance of this hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
No, excuse me, it has to be a motion for a date certain, you can't just motion to,
He's correct, you have to do
All
a date and
right.
time. So it would be March 7th at 7 PM.
Will you amend your motion to continue the meeting to March 7th, Bob?
Absolutely.
All right.
and I would also suggest that they are outside of the timeline of the enforcement order, that if they are not present at that meeting, that the fines that we had listed in the enforcement order take place.
That would be the logical next step, absolutely.
Yes.
All right.
All right, we have a motion,
Second.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Five 548 Northfield Road. Are they here tonight, Matt?
No, that would be the North County Land Trust.
They want to continue to the 7th?
Jassy Bradco had a conflict,
Yep.
and she had asked for a continuance to the 7th
Okay.
when we rescheduled for this meeting, but I had to put her on anyway so you guys could do like the chairman had just stated, to do the motion and the
Right.
vote for the continuance to the next meeting.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we continue till the March 7th meeting at 7 o'clock.
That's great, I have to open the hearing first. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, as amended in the Town of Lunenburg Wetlands Protection and Municipal Bylaws, public hearing on a request for determination of applicability by the North County Land Trust for work at 548 Northfield Road will be held. The applicant has requested a continuance to March 7th. I'll accept a motion for a continuance to March 7th for
So
this
moved.
hearing. We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Is 40 Fire Road 12, they're continuing?
He's got the flu.
He's got the flu. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, as amended in the Town of Lunenburg Wetlands Protection and Municipal Bylaws, a public hearing on a request for determination of applicability by Scott Benjamin for work at 40 Fire Road 12 will be held. The applicant is under the weather and has requested a continuance until March 7th meeting. I will accept the motion for continuance to March 7th.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Five Electric Avenue? All right. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, as amended in the Town of Lunenburg Wetlands Protection and Municipal Bylaws, a public meeting on a request for determination by Zhu Min of K&E Realty Trust of 5 Electric Avenue for the construction of a parking lot and stormwater system within the buffer zone at 5 Electric Avenue.
Do you have the plan? I give it to Matt. I think you should.
Yes, ma'am. Why don't you come up here and
Yeah.
speak into the microphones?
Yeah.
And you can just,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I'm going to recuse myself as the applicants are tenants of mine.
Very good.
Understood, yeah. All right, so we tried to put in a parking lot for 33 spaces here.
Yep.
And,
And this is the Asian Imperial
yes,
Restaurant,
for
ma'am?
agent
Yes.
existing, yeah. So I'm not sure what we need at this point. Just recommended by Adam to be.
It looks from, like, the plan you've submitted, so will you point out where the new parking lot is going to be constructed?
Yep, so it'll be right here.
In a lot that's currently
Yeah.
occupied by an existing home? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it's gone now. There's no home.
And it's gone now, and it
Yes.
looks like that the edge of that lot is just barely touches the 100-foot buffer zone and falls within our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Is it? all the commissioners had a chance to review, or they'd like to take a look at the drawings? Any questions from the commissioners?
So am I clear, I'm sorry, that the reason we're reviewing this, that the only activity proposed is over here,
Yes.
and that the only reason we're reviewing this is because of this little piece that is in the buffer?
Yes, sir.
And there's no activity in the existing lot?
There was activity because there was some grading that was done. This is actually a retro filing, but it was minor. So, I mean, a negative should handle it. The only thing I would advise the applicant is that in the snow removal that has been done in the past, in the corner of the existing lot on the bottom by the wetland, some of the snow has been dumped in there in the past, and that needs to be removed off-site.
The corner of the existing lot.
Corner of the, right behind the building.
I think he's talking about right here. Yeah, I will speak to Steve about it.
Okay. Very good. Well, the applicant...
We'll take- yes,
We'll take
yes,
care of that, and
yeah.
we'll ensure that the snow
Yes.
removal does not impact
Yes.
that area. All right. Any other questions from the commission? Yes, Bob?
Are they gonna pave it? Where's the drainage gonna go? Is there gonna be a storm drain, you know?
Yeah, we're gonna pave it. I think this plan showing,
Other plans show the paving plans, so.
And where does the water go? From the paving?
this is storm.
Drainage system here.
And it dumps it out where?
Everything grades down towards Electric Avenue, away from the wetlands, Bob.
And so does it then flow out onto Electric Avenue, or does it go North Storm Drain? Where's it go?
They have a separate system for that.
Yeah, that system
They
right there.
designed by Russ Engineer.
So it's
Where's
going
the
in,
plug?
so the water from the parking lot's gonna go into a septic system?
No,
No,
there's no
it's-
septic,
no.
it's a sewer.
Into a storm drain?
Yes.
So then where does it go from in the storm drain?
What's happening is David Ross designed a system that was approved by the planning board, where the drainage goes, the drainage from that upper parking lot will go into a leach system. It's a small...
So it does go into a leach system?
Like a storm septic.
Yeah, storm sewer,
Yeah, okay.
which is right here in the plan. You just can't really read it because it's...
And this has already been approved by the planning board?
It's been approved by the planning board, yes, but because it was in the buffer zone, I had talked to Adam, and we both felt because it does touch the buffer zone.
And I'm assuming the planning board had engineers review that?
That's correct.
To make sure it was, thank you, I'm done.
Mr. Chairman, right on that end there, it's primarily outside, but it's like a little island or something down there?
On the north end?
Yeah. Is there like a little, I'm just wondering what that little,
Where is it?
it looks like
What is the
a,
white pole?
some kind of an island.
Yeah.
Parking island?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
it
that's
looks like Bacon Drive.
it says there right now. Where is it? So if you're going in here, oh, this is, I think the little island, so this is make it like
so
the flow of
it's a
the parking lot,
driveway,
you can drive around, yes.
got it.
Yep,
So so that's the regrading, so that those two lots
yes,
kind of...
yeah, connected, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
I don't have any other questions.
Nothing. No question.
No? Any questions from the public? Yes, sir. Please, name and address, please.
Steve Douglas, 24 Wintergreen Court.
Can you please come forward and speak in the microphone, sir? Thank you.
Steve Douglas, 24 Wintergreen Court. I was just curious, are you a tenant or do you own the property?
I'm the owner of the property, yeah. Thank you.
Misunderstood.
Matthew Allison, 305 Flat Hill. I spoke with Greg Bittner, the planning chair,
Yes, sir.
this afternoon, and I don't remember exactly where he said it was, but there was somewhere there was a requirement for plantings along the 30-foot no disturb.
I don't see any plantings called out on the drawing.
Okay, yeah. I got it.
And that wouldn't,
Was that a planning board requirement?
I don't remember. I don't think it was, but.
There was demarcation required.
Okay.
Which the plantings are behind the stone wall.
Okay.
Which is one of the reasons why I was actually making sure the commission reminded the applicant about the not dumping over the stone wall, because it was gonna destroy the plantings if it kept up.
Okay. Very good.
But if you look behind the stone wall, the plantings are there, because I did check that out.
Okay, very good. Just wanted to.
No, it's an excellent question.
are you referring, Matt, are you referring to the plantings that were required as part of their 2011 plan where they had a replication?
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think they
Yeah.
put in.
Okay. Because that replication is noted on the plan. All right.
Yeah, there were a couple of different iterations of that plan before the current owner actually took it over.
Okay. Well, if there's no other comments from the commission and no other comments from the public, I will accept a motion for a -3 determination for this project.
So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And we're here for our final hearing of the evening for the Hickory Hills Dam. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, as amended in the Town of Lunenburg Wetlands Protection and Municipal Bylaws, public hearing on the notice of intent by the Hickory Hills Lake Association for work at Hickory Hills Dam will be held. Mr. Bertram?
Yes.
How are you?
Tom Bertram, 312 Townsend Harbor Road, President.
Can you grab one of the microphones? Thanks.
Tom Bertram, 312 Townsend Harbor Road, President, Hickory Hills Lake Association. So you guys want to copy the prints?
Yes.
We have, I think we've already submitted to you everything in electronic format. I think we've already submitted everything in electronic format.
The big blue binder is there. Yeah, that's what I said.
I'll let you guys deal with that as you see fit. So, we have a presentation here that kind of outlines the project, and then we can, I can deliver that if you'd like.
Great, go ahead.
Okay, so let's start. Hickory Hills compound, most of you are aware, 315 acre impoundment, 3,915 acre feet at the top of the dam, elevation 1,900 feet. The concrete portion of the dam is 147 feet, and the majority of the dam is adjacent to Townsend Harbor Road. So we had a engineering study back in 2012 by our engineer Ty and Bond, hydraulic and hydrology report. And what we learned is our dam does not meet the state requirement of the 1/2 PMF, which equates to, in our case, 15.5 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. The dam currently does meet the old requirement, which was pre-2008, I believe, which is a 500-year flood, which is 11.69 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. So to meet this requirement, we did we looked at a number of different options, and we found the most effective and cost-effective solution was to provide overtopping. So what is overtopping? We're going with a synthetic product called GeoWeb. And so basically, if you look at the top right, it's almost like a honeycomb. It's 3 or 4 inches high. And what happens is you strip 4 inches or so of the topsoil off. You lay down these strips of GeoWeb. They're anchored down, and then they're filled back in with topsoil. And then the vegetation will grow straight up through it. So the idea is, if and when the dam overtops, it won't erode and it won't fail. Some of the other solutions we looked at were replacing the actual dam mechanism itself, lowering the dam height, the concrete height, and putting in a large hydraulic gate. And that was just cost prohibitive and very detrimental. The other one was kind of just raising the height of the dam all the way across, and that was very detrimental to the wetlands and very expensive as well. So of those options, the one that made sense was the GeoWeb. So this is a typical cross-section of the dam. In the plans, we of course delineated the start of the project, the end of the project. So these mats start at on the water side, about 18 or 24 inches down the riprap. They peel down the riprap, and they roll all the way over the top of the dam and then touch the road. In most cases, where the road is parallel, right here, where the dam is offset from the road. Obviously, we don't interconnect with the dam or with the road. Separate section here, section 2. You can see here the hash mark at about the middle of the in the middle of the drawing. That is the access way, and we'll be using common practices of putting vegetation material down, landscaping material, and then riprap to keep the construction entrance clean, keep the road nice and clean for the traffic coming in and out. This second section shows the dam right in the middle, and then on the right-hand side is the area of probably the most area of concern to the Conservation Commission. There's a wetland down there, and we actually a few years back did a filter swale, big project. Most of you shaking your heads like you remember it. And we do encroach on the wetland there. I think the total square footage was something around 587 feet, if my memory serves me correctly. And we get a separate slide on that if we wanted to drill down to it. And then this is the final section of the dam. You can see in the middle of that white section is the second access road. And interestingly enough, on the far right-hand side on the corner, you see that that line is parallel. It turns out that is part of the existing structure today, and it's riprap. And everyone was under the assumption that Hickory Hills owned that. It turns out we don't own that. So the property owner at 307 Townsend Harbor Road actually owns that 60 or so linear feet of the dam. So we have provided you today with a letter from the landowner giving us permission to do this work, and we are in talks with them about procuring that land. So that's that. So you can see these diagonal lines. That is the actual placement of the GeoWeb, and of course there are topo lines on there as well. So there are a number of small places where the wetland is impacted. They're hashed mark here on the left. And my lovely assistant, Steve Douglas from Winter Court, will point those out to us. When they add up, I believe, again, they're 587 square feet. Let's see, that is the impact as we understand it. One thing to note is the wetland, the swale, connects via a riverbed, not a, well, just a, I don't want to say a culvert, but it's a waterway directly from the base of the dam, crosses under the road to the large wetland on the other side of Townsend Harbor Road. Very large wetland out there. So the two wetlands are connected via that waterway. So let's see, the timeline. Again, we contracted with Time and Bond for the engineering. We're looking for approvals now. The 253 has been submitted to the state. They have commented on that. We've got the comments back. We don't see any red flags there. We're here before you today in the DEP. The DEP has seen the filing and they have commented. I'm sure you've seen that. And we're here before you today to talk about the NOI. The next step will be to get selectmen's approval. The dam runs parallel to Townsend Harbor Road. So you see that we actually are within the right-of-way of the town. So since the work does need to be done within the right-of-way, it needs to go before the town meeting. So we're going to get on the agenda pending selectmen approval. Once we go to the town meeting, next thing will be is to issue an RFP to get qualified construction contractors, which there are amazingly few in the state of Massachusetts that actually want to touch a dam of this size. And then in the summer, we'll select a contract, and we plan on starting and commencing and completing the work this fall. So that's our timeline. So with that said, was there any questions, comments I can answer for you?
There were DEP comments relative to the replication or compliance with general performance standards for work in bordering wetlands. So I know Joe Fortune had reached out to the DEP agent that had commented. I believe it was Megan Selby. So have you guys heard back from her yet?
So the response, the only response we've seen, that I've seen, is just that the question was, here's the comment. My lovely assistant, Selectman Bertram here, has pointed out to me, in red, bolded. I did that. Additional information should be provided to document compliance with the general performance standard for BVW 310 CMR 10.554. So we're all intimately familiar with CMR 10.554, I know, because that's why we're here. But basically, as I read this, it says, notwithstanding the provision of CM 310, CMR 10.554A, the issuing authority, Conservation Commission, may issue an order of condition permitting work shall be, which results in the loss of a portion of border wetlands when said portion has surface area less than 500 feet. We're at 587. And I read this as an or. Said portion extends into in a distinct linear configuration, quote, finger-like, into the adjacent wetland, and in the judgment of the issuing authority, it is not responsible to scale down, redesign, or otherwise change the proposed work so that it could be completed without loss of said wetland. So basically, as I read it, I think you guys have the purview to make a decision whether we need to create a replication area or whether you can waive that. So I like turtles, ponds, salamanders, frogs, and snakes.
Matt, hold on.
Oh.
You had a comment, Matt?
He's absolutely right. If you guys determine that it doesn't need to be replaced, on the order of conditions, whatever you guys, issue for a decision, you would have to put in a finding of fact that the wetland was not significant to the interests of the act. And that's the first thing DEP will look for. So if you find it not significant, great, we just gotta word it so that they understand why, to prevent them from intervening.
Thank you, Matt, appreciate that. And so that brings us up to the photo here. What you don't see, too bad we didn't have that drone when we did this, right? Because you could get the idea of the slope of that dam, right? You see how close those topo lines together. See, I don't need to tell you guys, it's pretty steep right there. So in that area that is flagged as a wetland, it's very heavily vegetated, right? There's a lot of big trees there. There's only a real small area where it's marsh. So I would venture to say that if we were to replace that 500 square feet of wetland, we would be doing more potential damage, disturbing the earth there and making it unstable in case something was to happen to the dam, versus the significance of 587 square feet in comparison to the downstream wetland, right? The downstream wetland, the wetland across the street from the dam on Townsend Harbor Road, is huge, right? I mean, it goes all the way down to the Cowdrey lot. And the upstream wetland is the lake, right? So again, I'm a big fan of our wetland creatures, and I fight very hard to keep it. In this case, I think what we're trying to do to come into compliance versus that small area of, 500 feet, what, that 10 by 50? So that, of course, as the landowner, that would be my opinion, right? So, but that's my opinion, guys.
Matt?
I would remind the commission, that when we did our initial site walk back in the early fall, one thing we did note was that particular area appeared to have been created simply by a seep under the dam. If it wasn't for the weakness in the dam, that area doesn't exist. It really
Matt, can you
doesn't,
just
it doesn't
pick up on
really
that comment
contribute
one
to...
more time? I couldn't quite hear what you were reminding the commission of.
What I was saying, Rich, was that when we did our inspection in the early fall, we noted that area and noted that it was simply in existence due to a seep coming from under the dam. It didn't really connect to anything, and it really didn't seem to serve much of a purpose, other than the fact that it was just there, because the water was, seeping under the dam. That's it.
Thank you.
Lovely assistant points where it's that little thing, yeah, okay. And the little piece, the dark shaded.
Hey, Tom, I did have a quick question for you. Are you going to be scraping the entire 4 inches off the entire dam and then going back, or are you going to do it in sections in case that we do happen to have an event that would cause an overflow with the 4 inches missing?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're mandated by the state to do sections in 300 feet. So they need to be opened, worked, and closed. And if they're not closed, I think it's overnight, they need to be mulched with straw, I believe. So yeah, it's very limited. The work, you strip a piece, you put the product down, and you put it back, and you move to the next section. Very similar to what we did with the swale.
So you'll have roughly 6 or 7 phases as you're going along the dam face.
Well, each strip is going to be, 300 feet, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit that close. I don't want to stand here because I know.
Thank you. And you intend to have this done in the fall?
Yes, if everything goes well, yeah, during our normal drawdown this fall is when we intend on doing it.
Okay, and we're just doing sections of it if you don't finish it? Not like you'll have anything open for the winter time?
Absolutely not.
Thank you, Ms. Bertram. Any questions from the public? Any other questions from the commission?
I don't have any questions.
With that, I will accept a motion for a standard order of conditions with the caveat that we will make an exception for replication of the 580 some odd 87 square feet of wetlands that will be
Written up in a narrative of non-significance.
and written up in a narrative as
They actually used to have a form for that, but
and written up in a narrative of non-significance with the
They
order.
actually used to have an extra form for that. They still do? All right, well then I'll attach the notification of non-significance to the form.
All right.
I thought they eliminated that form.
So moved.
We have a motion, second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Well done.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Matt, why don't you tell me about the field change for the Lunenburg Water District, 496 Mass Ave, that's on the agenda?
I have plans to the effect. I have larger versions, but I'll give you guys some of this will be the small version you can pass around. Essentially, there was one change that they're making in the buffer zone itself. In this section right here, there was an electrical line that was gonna come up this way. Instead, it's gonna come down and then come up this way.
Make sure you speak to the mic.
There was an electrical line that was actually gonna go this way. It's now gonna go down and come up. There's no real change in impact in the buffer zone, but it is a change in direction.
Okay.
There were 2 other minor changes, but they were outside the buffer zone, and that just has to do with utility placement, and that's it.
In your opinion, these are insignificant field changes?
Yeah, it's not changing any impacts at all. It wouldn't even change our boiler. It's just a the line, instead of going this way, is going this way, because they're doing it by pole.
Okay.
I have the change in the narrative, and it is outlined on larger scale plans.
Do you want us to vote to approve that changes?
Please.
All right. So, based on Matt's narrative of the insignificant changes at 496 Mass Ave, I will accept a motion to approve the insignificant field changes as noted by the conservation agent.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, now we'll move on to our second appointment for the evening. The Lake Shirley Improvement Corporation is coming to give us an update. Their representative, Dominic, is here to thrill us with his tales of weeds and glory.
Educate us, maybe.
Good evening. Thank you for having us in tonight. So, we provided the commission with our annual year-end report for Lake Shirley's management program. So we actually provided the report on November 30th. I'm not sure if it actually got around to all the commissioners at that time, but there was only a very small revision that was done at the beginning of January.
Clarify, as I did remind the commission in previous emails just recently, I had received the original version. It was an unfinished draft. I received the finished draft on December 21st, which then went up on the cloud after I got back from my vacation.
Yep.
And you guys have had that for a little while.
Yep.
So
Thanks, Matt.
the stuff was issued, so.
Very good, thank you.
I mean, the only revision was adding the drawdown data.
Yeah, it was the
The
last
rest of the
one, the
report
data.
was substantially there. So I'll just briefly go through. I know that you folks are pretty familiar with the program, but this year, basically we did a few things differently based on the conditions in 2016. We actually we're planning to go with a two-treatment approach to better match the growth patterns of the plants that were involved in the management, specifically curly-leaf pondweed, which was the target of the early effort, and other species including naiad and tapegrass, which was the target of the effort later in the season. So the initial treatments, the initial surveys were done on April 27th and May 10th. We did not see any curly-leaf pondweed at the end of April, but we did see some in May 10th. About 30 acres or so of the lake had sparse growth of curly-leaf pondweed, which is a vast improvement over 2016, where I think we had about 80 or 90 acres of curly-leaf pondweed, substantially more, which is why we decided to go with the two-treatment approach. So we were greatly heartened to see that the curly-leaf was reduced this year. So we proceeded with the early season treatment with diquat for the curly-leaf pondweed, again ended up being 32 acres. That was presented to the commission, the plan ahead of time and approved at the beginning of May. We proceeded with the treatment on June 1st, then went back to conduct the mid-season inspection and official kind of point survey, which is a quantitative survey, and that was completed on July 5th. Prepared another treatment plan, presented that to the commission, and then proceeded with that treatment on July 27th. Around the same time, we were seeing a decrease in water clarity. We had started the algae monitoring, and we did, after kind of talking with the commission and the agent, Matt, we just moved forward with an algicide copper sulfate treatment on August 3rd. Improved water clarity, reduced the cyanobacteria after that treatment, which was positive effect of the treatment. We did see towards the end of the recreational season at the end of August, we saw a slightly higher sample. It did not correspond with a decrease in clarity. Clarity remained above 4 feet at that time. The sample results were actually received after Labor Day, which was, the sort of the end of the recreational season, so there was no further treatments. The water clarity was continued to be monitored, and that did not see any significant reduction at that time. It stayed about the same, so no further algicide treatments were completed. And then at the end of the summer, we completed our repeat of the point survey on October 4th. All the data for all the treatments is provided in the report, including the areas, the quantities used, the types of herbicides, the weather conditions, the applicator, all the SECI disc monitoring, water clarity monitoring from the beginning of the season till the end is provided in the graph. The counts, we did a total of 4 algae counts and IDs, 3 by Northeast Labs and 1 by Dr. Wagner. Those are presented as well. The treatment specs for the copper sulfate treatment. And then we have our late season survey data extensively with the tables. Graph of plant density and biomass since 2002, species richness and observed species, number of species, graph as well. A lot of information. I won't try to get into every detail here. Have information about the drawdown and the refill, and then information about some of the lake management plan elements, including further water quality assessment, educational and outreach from the Lake Shirley Improvement Corporation. And just a quick section on recommendations for 2018. We were actually just talking tonight. I mean, we are at least initially planning on doing the 2 treatment approach. There's a little bit of feedback from this year. Certainly, we kind of got worried with the huge amount of curleaf that was found in 2016. It was much less in 2017. We'll probably check for that curleaf, but hoping that there's a further reduction, we may not need to do the first treatment at all. Additionally, there's some feedback that the end of July treatment may have been a little bit too late. So in terms of where we were at in the recreational season, so there may be an opportunity to make some adjustments. I mean, this was sort of an experiment based on some of the experiences we've had over the last few years. So.
Part of the 50% mass, right?
I'm sorry?
The 50% that we can only treat once it hits that 50%
Yeah.
mass. So if you've got the first lake that's 30 miles, and you've got Millionaire's Cove that's 5 miles, the 50% mass in that 5 mile is going to be a lot less than the 50 spread out over the course of the coves are finding it very difficult holding on, especially when there's numerous calls regarding the curly leaf in that late July, that their kids couldn't swim. It was entangling their, Mrs. Tossi called the walls regarding that.
I got confused. When you said we were a little late in July, were you talking about the algae treatment or
No, the weed treatment.
Yeah, okay, I thought so.
The weed treatment. No, the algae treatment, I think we were right on with.
Yeah, I thought so. That's why I was.
I think we had some discussions on whether it was too early or not. I think we came to the right decision.
Right. What made you feel I didn't notice that it was late. What made you feel?
Just some of, as Joanna said, some of the coves, the shallower areas of the lake, I think started seeing some of the robust growth a little bit earlier. For those specific areas, it may have benefited to be maybe 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time, but it's a little bit of a balancing game, but we like to take the feedback into consideration. Yeah.
Which just, the big issue that we saw that I certainly saw in the prior year 16, is that I was surprised was the tape grass.
Yep.
Which treat, because it was great in 17, so what part of the equation addressed that problem?
So that was the second treatment.
That was the second one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the first treatment was solely for the curlew pondweed. We only treated areas of the lake where we had found curlew pondweed during the initial survey.
Yeah.
So, one of the other big things that was going on at the lake this year is, again, the LSIC hired Ken Wagner. Just to be clear, I mean, Ken's project on the lake is separate. We would have obviously liked to been able to include that in the year-end report, but the year-end report is due November 30th. Ken's field season wraps up, and he's under no compunction from us to get his reports. I mean, that's just not, timing just does not fit with his operation there. His field season, ends in October. He has a multitude of reports he's trying to get out. He's still working on them. And that was an additional element, not really part of the basic management plan. So I felt, not having that data as part of the November 30th deadline on the report and that could be up for discussion. The reason I bring it up is I did talk to Ken. He plans to have the report done in the beginning of March, but I did go over, just because I was going to be here tonight, I did get some highlights from him just to review with the commission. The tasks that were done this year was plankton sampling, so zooplankton and phytoplankton, or algae. In-lake nutrient sampling, 3 rounds were completed. And they also did a significant effort on groundwater sampling, so 16 spots on the lake. They put in the seepage meters and were able to do both flow testing and nutrient testing on the groundwater. Just in summary, the algae results continue to be highly variable. There's a wide variety of algae, brown, green, cyanobacteria, diatoms. I mean, Ken was clear to me saying that there's definitely a high variability in what's seen out there. There was very kind of transient, moderate levels of cyanobacteria. Very often, a fair amount of suspended, just detritus and turbidity in the water during his sampling. Looking back to 2016, the sediment sampling that was done there was no additional sediment sampling done this year, but just to reiterate that he did see some evidence of kind of sediment release of phosphorus in both the north and south basins. So there is anoxic conditions on the bottom. There is definitely some release, but he definitely feels that there's a combination of loading here, both internally and from the watershed. The groundwater results were generally low to moderate levels of groundwater. The phosphorus was not high. Relatively, the nitrogen was high, which may be contributing to kind of a higher nitrogen to actually a higher nitrogen to phosphorus ratio, which favors non-cyanobacteria, which is actually a good thing. But he is planning to do the report, and part of the report this year is to go through a whole nutrient loading analysis using a lake loading response model, spreadsheet model. So it's going to be really interesting, I think, to see that. It really will be able to bring into focus all of the data that's really been collected as part of this program and see what the loadings of phosphorus and nitrogen are for the lake, and what could potentially be able to parse out how much is coming from what area of the lake, what type of loading, and be able to recommend some longer term measures that could be taken for that. So we were provided with quite a long list of comments. They just came in yesterday, so we haven't had time to address those in writing, but I'd leave it up to the commission how they want to proceed with going through those. We're certainly prepared to talk about them. Again, don't have a written response, but.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate they were late. They were late to you. I don't think I wasn't expecting, and almost glad you didn't do a written response, because that'd take a lot of energy, and I'd just soon have the conversation anyway.
Okay.
So I I just assume go through them tonight.
Okay, yeah, so I guess we'll just start.
Yeah, if we, I'd like to just say a couple of things before we start, and then, I want to make sure that the whole question gets framed. To begin with, the report, I think Solitude, which means you, Dominic, I'm sure, did an excellent job on the report to the extent that you're engaged. I know that you're not responsible for everything that's in the Lake Management Plan. So certainly everything that Solitude was contracted for was done very well. And although I do have some questions, they're half from my learning, just some things that I didn't understand. I don't see any major issues with those things. But there are also a number of questions more for the LSIC, because I feel uncomfortable, quizzing you on things that are not really in your responsibility.
Oh, we can team up on those questions, but yeah, I'd be happy to answer the more technical questions.
I'm sure you'll be able. The only thing that you comment on one thing, though, the Ken Wagner stuff is a little disturbing that it's this late. I mean, I don't know when he finished his work, in October or whatever, but this is February. The reports are due in November. This is the first we heard that they're not able to support that in November. But but the thing that caught my ear the most is, that I'd like to clarify, is that work, that as you outlined, and outlined in the report, not the results, but that it was being done, the stormwater reconnaissance, the in-lake water quality, the groundwater seepage, photoplankton, and modeling are being done. They are part of the Lake Management Plan, though. It's not like that's just sort of an extra thing we're doing. That is part of the Lake Management Plan, so it is part of what's supposed to be done and reported on.
Well,
Just to be clear on that.
I agree it's part of the Lake Management Plan. I mean, it's I feel it's separate from the permitted activities that were in the order of conditions, and specifically the year-end report that was due, by November 30th. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Ken probably wouldn't have accepted the work if we told him we had to have a report by November 30th, so I feel like we're better off having...
That's understandable, that somebody should have told us that instead of us sitting here waiting and...
No, because we do not at all say Ken Wagner is part of this program. He's an additional thing as we have money to utilize him.
I beg to differ. If you look at the Lake Management Plan, you have a whole section that specifically calls this out.
And I specifically every meeting said we can pay Ken, but we have money to pay him. We can't guarantee you every year we're going to have $15,000 to pay Mr. Ken Wagner, so he cannot be part of the plan.
Yeah, my only point is it is a whole section 6.1.5 that calls out exactly the Ken Wagner.
Well, I agree, the Lake Management Plan, we talked about the water quality stuff that we were doing. I guess the argument here is, what needs to be in the annual report due by November 30th.
I think everything in the Lake Management Plan is supposed to be reported on. And the report might be no activity. I'm not saying, that everything, but everything in the report is supposed to be, everything in the plan is supposed to be reported on.
I think moving forward, that's instructive. If they have areas that, they have subcontractors who are out and are unable to meet that schedule, we just note it moving forward, so that's fine.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, because the extension is going to be coming up before too long, I've said before, and I think this supports it, I think maybe the timing of the report is not right. I think maybe we should revisit November as the time of the report, that there may be a better month in the year to have the report when and everything kind of comes together. Because right now, the report is kind of spread between 2 years. We get half the drawdown in one report, half the other report. So we should revisit what's most convenient, because if the contractors are not going to have the information until March, then maybe May is the best time for a report.
Right.
There's nothing sacred about November. I'm not sure how we got there.
No, we could do
something that works better for everybody, I think would make sense.
Right. So when doing the extension, maybe we can talk about that.
Yep.
So I would like to go through some some things. The first area is trying to understand the copper sulfate and copper. The second treatment had copper sulfate added, and I'm not seeing any concentrations or anything, and most of the requirements we have, we need to put concentrations. So I'm trying to understand how much copper
Yeah,
we're
so I
putting in the
can, I
lake.
can explain that. So the Nautique is a liquid chelated copper herbicide. It is 9.1% copper by weight, so each gallon has about 0.09 pounds of copper per gallon.
0.09?
Yeah.
Not 0.9, 0.09.
No, 0.09, yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And when you say, because I don't know the chemistry, when we say copper and copper sulfate, are they?
No, copper is the metallic ion, so copper sulfate is copper, sulfate, and oxygen, so it's a molecule together. Copper is the active ingredient.
Is the active ingredient. So
And Nautique, it's a chelated copper, so the copper ion is bound to an organic molecule.
Okay. So the 0.09 pounds is copper or copper sulfate?
That's copper.
That's copper, thank you.
Elemental copper.
Great, perfect. Thank you.
So, the copper sulfate is, the 75 pounds that was applied along with the diquat is, that is a granular, so that's a powder.
Okay.
It's, applied however as a solution, so the copper is dissolved in water. And, copper sulfate is 25% elemental copper, so every pound of copper sulfate has a quarter of a pound of actual elemental copper.
Thank you. But the 75 pounds, okay, so the 75 pounds of copper sulfate, it's a quarter of that for actual copper. Thank you.
Yep. So the other 75% is the sulfate and the oxygen, and also water. There's water molecules in the dried powder.
But wouldn't there also, if it's chelated, wouldn't there also be, organic compounds in there too, if it's?
Yes, the chelated liquid has other compounds, and copper is the active ingredient, but Nautique, I have.
So the Nautique contains 75 pounds of copper sulfate? Is that what you're saying?
No.
No.
No, the Nautique, every gallon of Nautique has 0.09 pounds. We applied, 50 gallons, so we applied, about does that come up to 4.5 pounds? I have the math right? 4.5 pounds of
I
actual
didn't, there's a
copper.
decimal point missing in my number, so you probably caught that one.
But yeah, Nautique is a couple different type of chelates. I have a label that I can leave with you guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
So what is the concentrate, so when we, not for pesticide, for algicide treatment, but for, adding to the reward?
Yeah, so I mean, just in a general sense, the labels for copper, whether it's a herbicide or an algicide, typically the maximum label rate is 1 part per million of actual elemental copper in the water. For the Nautique, in the copper sulfate, when we're adding it in as an addition to a herbicide treatment, more as a synergistic kind of addition to the treatment, it's below like 1/10 of a part per million of copper. We typically, we added the Nautique where the areas were dominated really by tape grass, and we added the copper sulfate where there was less tape grass and more naiad in there.
It's a little lower density. Okay, that's great, thank you.
Yeah, the actual, like for an algicide treatment as comparison, we're at about 0.08 parts per million, so less than 1/10 of the maximum label rate for copper sulfate. That's typically works for cyanobacteria blooms, and I think I didn't actually do, we're below that even when we're adding it as a additive to the herbicide treatment.
Yeah, so it's even lower.
It's even lower
You
than
expected
that.
a lower concentration.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next one was in the Clarity area, and is.
So I'm aware this came up more recently about, I went back and looked at the minutes for the June 16th, and that was a while ago. Obviously I saw the minutes. I went back and looked at the old versions of the management plan. I did see the paragraph that was in the first version. It was dropped in the second and third version. So, agree with all that. I mean, based on this recent discussions we've had, I mean, our only issue with that, adding that back in, is the water clarity threshold. I mean, we'd prefer to see 5 feet instead of 6 feet. I mean, and that's up for discussion, but our concern is, you know, what really is the threshold we should be looking at? Obviously, 6 feet, on a lake like Lake Shirley, that's, you know, relatively shallow. I mean, going from the threshold of 5 feet up to 6 feet is gonna add potentially a lot more weekly algae monitoring, of paid, you know, examination of algae. You know, in our opinion, 5 feet is still protective of.
If I could, just so, because people may not even know what we're talking about here. When we met, I think it was over in Turkey Hill, to approve the lake management plan, there was a paragraph that it was inadvertently left out, and we brought it up, and Dominique acknowledged that it was a mistake. It wasn't intended to be left out, which required that when the clarity drops below 6 feet, that samples would be taken for algae.
Right.
That hasn't been happening. It didn't happen last year. We brought this up. It didn't happen this year. I think you bring up a good point about, is 6 feet the right number or not? But even when the level dropped below 5 feet, there was no algae samples taken. So, and that's how we got into almost got into trouble this year, because there wasn't an algae sample taken until, you know, it was at 4 feet in June, and there wasn't an algae sample taken until July 17th, and then there was a treatment required.
I don't think
so
that's
we need to get more
clearly correct. I mean, we didn't drop down to 4 feet until the end of July. We started taking samples at July 17th. I mean, we were below 6 feet. I'll agree to that at the end of June. It did dip down in the end of May also, but came back. It was only for a short time and came back up. We're looking at the 2017 graph on page 4 of 13. So obviously it's not a line for 5, but you know, 4, there's definitely a line for 4. We did not see a clarity reading drop to just above 4 until the end of July.
Yeah, I took that from the report. Maybe it wasn't 4 feet, maybe it was 5, but it was low in June, but it again, we didn't adhere to the 6 feet. It could have been discussed and brought to the commission's attention that, hey, that's burdensome, and look, you know, can we change it to 5? But there's been no discussion, so we assume without discussion that they're going to comply. And algae is a serious problem, as you know. I mean, it's a health hazard. Weeds are not convenient, but algae is a health hazard. So is there a commitment at this moment to comply with the plan for this season?
Yes, I mean, we'd like to discuss the threshold from changing from 6 down to 5. I believe.
That's true.
Honestly,
to me, I think that's reasonable. I mean, in my opinion, the LSIC is doing what's reasonable within the means that they have. And if they think 5 and is reasonable, and their experts are telling them that that's a reasonable threshold, speaking for myself, I don't have an issue with it. I don't know how the other commission members feel.
I agree with that. I live on Hickory Hills Lake. I can tell you when the pine pollen is in the water, it has a big impact on water clarity. I don't think it has any impact on water quality. To me, the only algae we're worried about is the cyano algae, the blue-green algae. So to talk about algae is a problem, based on, I once had a course in phycology algae. I think the only algae we have to worry about, but correct me if I'm wrong, is the cyano, the blue-green algae. So
from a toxin perspective,
from a toxin,
right.
From a health perspective. So I agree.
So I guess I think that's probably okay, and that's probably prudent, except the other part of the problem that I think is just as severe is right now, again, in the lake management plan, it says, it identifies 14 sites to take water clarity. I think, and I said forever that I think that's way excessive, and
Yeah,
it's
I think we need to
it's way too
find
many.
a medium.
But 2 sites, which is all that's being taken, one of which is in the deepest, most clear, cleanest spot in the lake, is really not going to do the job. When, there should be more sites, and I would say if we go to 5, which I would support, we should at least have some sites that are closer to shore, because that's where the algae is actually the worst, because it's warmer, and it's where it's the most dangerous, because it's where children swim and pets drink. So I could see going to 5 if we had some, and it doesn't have to be more than a half dozen or even that many, but they really should. I don't ever care if there's a algae measurement in the deep spot. Right?
Well, it's good for monitoring purposes. It's interesting to see.
It's interesting, but
Dominic, can you speak to Carl's comment?
Yeah, so, although it doesn't show it in the graph, there was a 3rd sample site taken in the North Basin. I'm not sure what number it was, but the reason we didn't show it separately on the graph was because it mirrored each other completely, and there was really no reason to add another line on the graph. But I do think we can address that by adding, a more reasonable, whether it's another 2 sample stations or whatever. Obviously, I agree, the 14 sites is quite a bit of an overkill. The problem with doing Secchi disc readings in shallow areas is that you're going to end up hitting the bottom of the lake more often than not, so unless it's really poor.
Except for the deep spot, I'm okay with sites that are not in shallow for Secchi disc. It's when you cross that 5-foot level and start taking algae counts,
samples.
because the state only takes algae counts, 10, 12 feet, 20 feet offshore. So when we cross that level where the algae counts, not necessarily, because I agree, Secchi discs close to shore aren't significant, but if we wait at 5 feet, we've seen, and I don't think you were with us when we went with Jerry Smith, but, we saw as much as a foot difference between the center and closer to shore for the Secchi disc. So when you cross 5 at the center, it could be already down to 4 at the beach where people are swimming.
And this is for Secchi and algae?
We took, it was an algae condition, but he came down and we took some measurements. We said, hey, let's go, let's just take a few closer to shore, and it changed by a foot, but,
Yeah, so I think, obviously, it seems like we have an agreement on 5 feet, so we can add that to the LMP. I think we'll need to discuss what sites, and maybe we have to provide that as a map.
Yeah, can you propose that to us so we can,
I think that's reasonable. Any other comments from the commission members on that? Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
I have a quick question, Dominic.
Sure.
Looking at the clarity, 2017 was by far the worst year for clarity in Lake Shirley. Do you have any reasons as to that?
Well, yeah, we're only looking at, on this graph, 2015 and 16. Yeah, obviously, it appears that 2017 was worse than 15 and 16, but I think if you look back to 2014, when we had the severe blooms and closures, that we're obviously much better than that year. But I think it goes back to kind of what Ken was saying. I think there's a lot of variability in the lake, having loading from both the watershed and internally. I think the weather, precipitation patterns can really have a really amplified effect in the lake. So I think we're seeing here differences primarily due to that, weather patterns and precipitation patterns. The other thing is that, I think, as Ken also mentioned, there's a really abundant amount of what we consider good algae in terms of the ecosystem, but maybe not as much so for water clarity and recreation, but the greens and the algae and the diatoms were very abundant as well. So, the lower water clarity is not necessarily an indication of cyanobacteria and hazardous conditions, but it could also be an abundance of more beneficial species that are still having an effect on the water clarity, along with turbidity Water levels could affect that, boat traffic, what time of the year we're at, whether it's samples we're taking on Monday or a Thursday. I mean, there could be a lot of different things at play.
Okay. And we've spent a lot of time on clarity. Is there any other metrics that you could use to help in the decision to send samples away for testing? Temperature or nitrogen load or phosphate load, or, I mean, it seems like we're putting a lot of attention on clarity.
Yeah.
And it is so variable, it's really hard to make a decision off of just that one metric that you're taking.
It is, unfortunately, like, phosphorus and nitrogen are kind of trailing. They're not really good indicators of short-term indicators of algae growth. Unfortunately, we do end up relying on both the clarity and the algae results. We will have, we have spoken to the lab. We're going to have typically we're getting results back 5 to 7 days this year. They've made available to us at a higher cost, premium cost, but a guarantee of 48-hour turnaround times on the algae results. So, and I think that'll help. Other things we could look at are turbidity, chlorophyll, I mean, potentially, but those are going to be, require additional field meters, so that's going to increase the cost to the LSIC too, which is not something we want to do. I think the increased algae monitoring is going to be...
It's not something I'm looking to put forth. I mean, it's just, unfortunately, like I say, clarity is so variable to jump up and down when you reach a certain point.
Right.
It's really hard to set 5 feet as the break in when you have to test. Now, if we know it's a dry season, or we know there's a lot of other turbidity in the water, you guys, if you can, put forth a recommendation on if you want to go to 5 feet, and maybe put in some other variables, if it's dropped 1 foot in less than 2 weeks to clarity, or the temperatures are higher, or we've had a lot of rain, so there's a lot of nutrient load in the lake, we would start to do some testing at that point. I mean, I certainly don't want to push LSIC into just weekly testing because the water clarity is at 5 feet. If there's no other signs or no other reasons to be testing, we really shouldn't have to be pushing that.
Yeah, I think ultimately...
Something, if you guys are interested, is put forth a proposal that will, take up in when we do the extension for the order conditions and the updates to the management plan.
Yeah, we'll definitely consider that. I think for the short term, we'll probably have to rely on the combination of the clarity and the algae IDs. I think I felt it was a good discussion this past summer. Ken had to get involved, which I'm not sure he's going to always be available for, but I think him reiterating kind of what everybody else was saying and kind of backing that up should help give everybody more comfort, maybe with recommendations for this summer if we need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing we're looking for in all of the data and all the reports is clarification into why you feel you have to treat.
Yep.
I don't necessarily think that we have to be the daily fleet of the lake. It's more to back up that this is why we recommend the treatment.
Right.
Either for the weeds or for the algae. So to that point, I think Kent's data is definitely important to add to the discussion because it validates the need for the algae treatment. Plus, hopefully, will give us a bit of a roadmap moving forward into perhaps trying to evade treatment down the road.
Yep. Agreed.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to close out the clarity, so I think we're going to get is a proposal on some new additional sites for SECI measurements, and then some sites for algae count measurements once you cross that threshold, and they won't necessarily, they may be different, right?
Right.
I would expect them to be different, because I don't think, as you say, you ever want to go close to shore with the SECI disc.
You're not gonna do a SECI disc.
Right.
Okay.
And 2 feet
I think
long.
that makes the discussion a lot easier though, Dominic, if you guys propose it and then the entire commission can review it, rather than kind of hash back and forth on 20 sites, 2 sites, 6 sites, 4 sites.
Right.
I think it's a little better if you as a professional put forth the recommendations.
Yep, agreed.
Okay.
And again, that's just my opinion. Everybody else has an opinion as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay. Yeah, the next one was a simple one, Dominic, on the chart, 2007's missing, I just didn't know why.
Yeah, I'll have to look back at the geosyntec reports, but I mean, my feeling was for some reason there wasn't a report that year, or I don't have a copy of it. So there was also a gap in 2014, which I think was around that year when we transitioned the new order and didn't have that requirement to do the annual,
That rings a bell.
geosyntec
That rings a bell.
surveys.
But 07, I would have,
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe for some reason I hadn't been able to
Okay,
locate
you
it,
just
but
look at it, it's not-
we'll see if we can get a hold of that.
Is it the third-party survey?
Yeah, the third-party survey from 2007, we're missing data on our graph. I don't know if maybe you have a copy of that.
2007?
Yeah.
yeah, because it's a nice table, it goes all the way back to, what, 2002 or something? It goes quite a ways back.
2002, yeah.
And
Can't
so
find it.
It's just missing one data
It
point.
is what it is
Oh, I have it.
at this point.
Yeah, no, I'm
Right.
sure,
I'm sure it's somewhere, it'd be nice to have it, because you're 99%
Talk about
away
plant
there.
richness now?
Yes. Plant richness and diversity. We're continuing to lose ground there. Last 2 years, we've dropped 25%, and we've dropped, and again, just for people's sake, in 2002, we had 24 native species in the lake, and this year in 2017, we have 10. And it's gone down a significant amount every year, and so the questions are, why do you think that is, and can we recover from it, and what steps could be taken to recover?
So yeah, a few thoughts on that. First of all, the species of interest actually went up last year, so we did have a drop down again this year to the lowest yet, but I think I caution taking too many conclusions from one year to the next on these trends here. The species richness again went up in 2016 from 2015. So I think there's a lot of things at play here. You'll see that the species richness dropped significantly from 2005 to 2006, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was actually the year before we started treating the lake.
Yeah, 2006 was the disaster year. That was the
year we had a terrible algae bloom.
Algae killed every week in the lake.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, the species richness has been floating around 3 since 2006. It wasn't appreciably different in 2013 after, roughly 5 or 6 years of treatment at that point. It did, I think, start to go down. And obviously the total number of species has gone down pretty steadily from 2006, so I'll definitely accept that as a fact. But I think there's different things at play here. Obviously I think the drawdown practice was significantly more systematic after 2006 or 7. Is that, I'm going back to, this predates kind of my involvement.
It went to hell in 2007. Until 2007, it was a very controlled, 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet, 7 feet, then back down to 4 feet between 2002 and 2007.
Okay.
2007, since 2007, it's basically been 4 to 5 feet the same every year, which is, as we've talked about before, is not really recommended. And so maybe that's part of it, maybe having that same amount every year as opposed to varied. There's something else going on, I don't know what it is.
Potentially, I think there's other things at play. I think there's a really large portion of the plants that we have been finding over the years have been at a really relatively low number of points. So, even if a plant is found at only 1 point out of the 66, that gets added to the total number of species found. And there was a significant amount of those species that was found was very low. I mean, 1 or 2, maybe 3 points. A lot of those were found in the habitat areas that we don't treat. A lot of those singular species were found in non-treatment areas. There's also, I think, a little bit difference with the surveyor, through geosyntec years. I think was he always the one that came up
always
to
did
do
it,
it? Yeah.
He's no longer with Geotags.
Yeah, so obviously there was all those years, there was one single person that always went out and did that. I mean, I'd love to be able to do that at Solitude, but we just, we don't have the ability to keep somebody that consistently out in the field. We have a lot of different field people, so I mean, I've done the survey, we've had a couple different biologists do the survey. I think there's a lot of conditions, especially with the species that you only find very sparingly in the first place. There may have been 5 or 6 of those species, 7 maybe even, that you only find very sparingly. In one year you might find them, and the next year you may not find them. But I think the species richness has been definitely a drop this year, but I think that's been fairly steady since 2006.
I guess what I want to know, Dominic, is the drop in the species richness and the drop in the plant diversity. Does it concern you? Is it something that you find unusual compared to other lakes that you manage?
I think that the total number of species would normally, it's of some concern. It's probably not a really large concern, just knowing all the different spread of species. We have really 4 or 5 really dominant species that we always find, and the rest, almost all the rest of them are those. I think if we spent more time out there, I bet you we would find all those species and more, because of just the limited distribution of those plants. So I take this data with kind of a grain of salt.
Okay.
And that. And I don't think I think maybe we might have lost a species or 2 because of the repeated treatments, but I don't think it's, by and large, can be related to that entirely.
Okay. All right,
It may be thought when we do a comprehensive study that they'll be able to confirm that there are indeed 25 or 30 species of plant life out there, but just in limited numbers.
Yeah, so first off, I think there's a little, I'm not sure that was completely understood. So it sounds like, just from some of the stuff I've been looking at with the comments, that we're expecting still to have a more comprehensive survey of the lake. I think we had purposely adopted Geosyntec's protocol and have been doing that every year now to try to get away from having to do a more costly vegetation survey of the lake. So that wasn't quite clear to me whether that was a requirement of the order.
There is a requirement in the order for a comprehensive survey. If you're performing it now, I would have to go back and just compare to the Geosyntec survey of, when the last time they did it, 14 or 15?
Yeah, I think you'll find it to be pretty similar. We actually stole some of the tables out of their report to use in ours because it just made more sense to do that.
Very familiar.
We can certainly take a look and review it, and if we've got the data here, then I would see no need to do it, but I would just have to confirm that, and I'm sure the other members would have to as well. But again, just going back quick, I mean, you say that you may have the plant species out there, you're just not finding them. I guess I'm just a little tossed up, and maybe they're out there, maybe they're not. Is there some way that you could just kind of verify that? Because I myself do have a bit of a problem with the drop in the number that you have left in the lake.
No, I mean,
To the point, is there any plan to try to reintroduce some of these species that were out there originally? I mean, they were there for a reason, doing something.
yeah, what I'm kind of thinking is, the days we do the point surveys are kind of long. I mean, trying to get to all those points. So what really needs to be done is you need to stick a biologist in those habitat areas alone for a few hours and really scour them. I think we'd find. But some of that could maybe be done as kind of either training for some of our staff. I mean, I know any added hours at this point for the LSIC is very difficult for them to do, so, but obviously I've been involved with this project for a number of years, even bring a, a biologist out, as a kind of a training exercise, just try to work this in somewhere so we can take the time and try to find some of these species that we haven't been able to locate for a few years. Trying to work that in somehow.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly doesn't have to be done every year, but while we're going for the extension, I mean, it should be something that if they're out there, we should be noting that they're out there.
Yeah.
Again, looking at the chart, going down and down and down, I myself do have an issue with, eradicating plants from the ecosystem. So it may not be a bad thing to try to, if we can, for the extension. And again, it's not something, if they're out there, that's great, that's not something that I would feel strongly having to do every year or every 5 years, or, we know they're there, even though it shows the drop. When we go out and look, they're still there.
Yeah, I agree.
They are there.
I think we can work with the association and some of our staff training needs, maybe to work something out so that we can do this every few years, spend a half a day in some of the habitat areas where we found these species in the past. We'll try to get that done before the fall here, and we're up for extension.
Just for my clarification.
I myself, I would be happy with that, to verify that they are indeed there, that we haven't lost the diversity.
Is he talking the same thing as the third-party survey, or more comprehensive than the third-party survey?
Yeah, so I think it's still up in the air. So yeah, he's talking a little more.
To clarify, I think what Rich indicated was that if we're already doing a more comprehensive study, if there's a way that, as Dominic suggested, that there may actually be some species out there that we haven't missed, if there's a way that we can incorporate or verify whether or not they're there in the course of the regular survey that we're going to do, that's what we'd like to see if we can.
Right. So that's why I just went, because we still do the third-party survey every third year. Is that right? That's the...
Well, that's, I guess, that's kind of the question. Was that your understanding?
I thought that was part of what our condition is, that every third year we have to do the third-party survey. And we have to do it for Shirley as well. So with that, every third year, you could do that comprehensive. Because you're mimicking Geotags.
That's what, yeah, that was my,
Points,
we're basically doing exactly what Geotags would have done, so I think this may be a compromise, and that maybe if we don't have to do another third-party survey every 3 years, if we just spent half a day out on the lake with a biologist and try to.
That's what I was thinking, because I know you do that. So-
Kind of what I'm hearing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that.
But check the, you will anyway, the geosyntax, there might have been some little tiny things that, phosphoruses or there might have been some other pHs or something that were
I'll check, but yeah, I'm pretty sure we.
Not much, I think this is pretty, what you're doing now is, like you say, the tables look like the same tables to me.
Great.
But if we could,
Yes.
okay, so on the one thing.
Do you want to talk any more about plant diversity? Okay, you want to touch on drawdown briefly? And then maybe wrap this up?
Well, first part I can do. In the report, I just wanted to note that you did make note, which I believe is absolutely true, that the fanwort is primarily at depths beyond the drawdown levels. And I just wanted to confirm two things we've talked about in the past, but just see if you've changed any of your thoughts, is that if consistently in the past, so that a deeper drawdown would be beneficial.
I think all things being equal, I mean, as you know, there's ongoing issues with whether that's possible or not.
Just from a technical point of view.
From a technical point of view, yeah, obviously exposing the deeper areas of the shoreline would provide additional control of fanwort. Yeah.
And any different thoughts on the varied drawdown?
Yeah, to me, 4 or 5 feet is a level that a lot of lakes bring they're watered down too. I mean, it's usually when you're going beyond that is kind of where I see the lakes groups usually try to vary it. Like if they're gonna go to 8 feet, you know, one year, the other 2 years, they'll go only to 4 feet. So, I don't see, in my opinion, I mean, the 4 to 5 foot drawdown, I think it's providing a lot of good control of the fan wart. I think it probably would have some really bad years of fan wart if we tried to go shallower than that, only to say go down 2 feet, and that might cause other issues with shoreline maintenance and stuff like that.
Because of the, you know, in the order of conditions or in our discussions for sure, the goal that we've sort of set for the LSIC was to strive to achieve the Metcalf-Netty report. And in that report, 4 feet is basically no drawdown, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. So,
yeah, if we were doing
I wasn't saying go below 4, I was saying if we were able with those other issues to get above 5, that it should start to vary because it's so deep. Okay.
I mean, as you know, it's been kind of an ongoing kind of back and forth about, when we go lower, we get problems with some of the shallower wells around the lake.
Yeah, and I guess that's my question, so you led right in, which is great, because the chairman would like to move us along. I guess the fundamental question is, why did we stop at 50 inches, which is barely over 4 feet? I don't see anything in the report that, you know, that discusses, first, the refill data, you know, really should start earlier because it only gave us 1 month of that period. So I'm not sure we're getting all of the data from that's required.
Well, yeah, I think they don't close the dam till the beginning of April, right? Or is it beginning of March? But you don't start refilling till the beginning of March, right? Start refilling in the beginning of March and
Usually,
try to get done by
we
then.
start now. Actually, I'm going to say it wrong because I do every time. One gate's open, one gate's half. So I'm assuming the bottom gate is open, the top is halfway. I wasn't being rude, I was looking for the 7 survey.
Yeah, so I mean, we're not significantly starting the refill much before March 1st.
Well, I guess that's why, if I look at the data in the report, it doesn't look like it's what we asked for, because we don't get data for the whole drawdown period. I know it doesn't start till October 15th or something, but we only got data until the end of November for the lake level, and then we only got refill data for 1 month at the other end. So, I mean, we should be getting data, weekly data for the entire period of the drawdown, so mid-November, mid-October to the beginning of April, hopefully, if it's full.
Yeah, I think that relates to what you were saying earlier about the timing of the report, too. We're trying to close the report.
Is the data available, or is it just not in the report?
No, I believe there is data available after November 30th.
So could we get, we just answered, so could we get all of the data that's available?
I know.
I don't know when you want me to talk about.
So, for clarification, Carl, so do we have the drawdown data from 2016 or from?
We have, in this report, we have the drawdown data until the end of November.
Okay.
Which is not when the lake is done drawing down.
Right.
And then it stops.
Right.
And then we have refill flow data.
Why is that incorrect, Joanna?
Because if we hit by November 30th, is the date he uses, we hit 5 feet.
Whatever your target is, you stop.
And someone calls and says, my pump, my water, which Revis over on Spring Street starts, we have to close the dam. So usually, and once that dam's closed, if we're already at a froze, if it's already at that frozen point, then the drawdown's done, because the goal is to get to there by first frost. So it's not that all winter long, we're plowing going in, and once we've hit that mark based on how quickly we got down to that first phone call. And we try to get to 8 feet. We do not shut that gate, because it's at 5 feet, it's at 6 feet. We shut that gate, and the gate is driven by being shut by a phone call.
So that's the other half of what we're missing. So we're missing data because in the requirement, we're supposed to have lake level data and refill data for the entire drawdown period. So we don't have that.
It doesn't say anything about refill data. It says drawdown rate and downstream flow should be maintained as I'm sorry, you're right. Weekly lake level and stream flow should be logged and submitted with the annual report.
Right, which we do with the state, because the state has water monitors at 2 of our basins, over at Oak Ridge, and over at Stone Fence. They have these water things that Richie Patry goes and determines that as part of the recharge. And once that has hit, he stops that. And again, with the dam, as I said, once they get to that point of the first phone call, they stop and they don't go in and plowing.
Well, it seems to me then, if that's the case, it would make more sense to do this in the spring rather than try and make the cutoff at November 30th.
Yeah, well, we don't cut it off at November 30th. It sounds like there's more data, we just don't have it. It sounds like you give more data to the state.
I think there is more.
So, that's on our questions that we get all
but
the
if
data.
someone's preparing a report and it's November 30th and it's due, they're not gonna, they're only gonna have the data up to a certain point of when they're editing that document, so you might only have for the lagging year.
Yeah, and that's what they do. We're already at it. What we're talking about is from last November. So we weren't expecting that data last November. We're
So
accepting
you're
it
talking
in this report.
2016 into 2017, that's what you're talking about.
2017, we have
Spring of 2000, you should have in this report.
we have the fall of, we have the drawdown data from November of 17 through November 30th.
October 15th to November 30th.
Right. And then we have the spring
the
data.
refill
But we don't
rate
have any
from-
data in between. We're supposed to get weekly data through the whole period.
So I understand what you're saying.
Because the lake keeps going up and down. It doesn't,
Right,
you don't
understood.
stop the.
Bob?
I'm just curious why we want this data, how it will help us improve the environment. The fact that we're missing data after November, what difference does it make? What decision will be impacted by the lack of this data?
I think that's a great conversation when we're establishing the order of conditions, but the order of conditions
I
requires
asked
it.
it now. You're asking all these questions about data. I'm asking you now, why do we care about this data?
It's in the order of
It
conditions.
would be nice to know when what the maximum drawdown reached for every year would be, and for how long the surface of the lake bed was exposed to the winter temperatures. Unfortunately, cut off of November 30th, we have no data for the time, and that's when most of the action is supposed to be happening. So we don't know how far down the water's been, we don't know how long it was exposed, we don't know when the water started filling back in. So it is data that certainly should be there, it's historical moving forward and backwards. So we can
Richie's
compare
data
year to
from
year.
the spring.
So it certainly is data that should be put in there. If they cut it off on November 30th, whenever they cut it off, add it to the next year's report.
I don't recall this commission ever going back and looking at the previous year's drawdown data to make a decision.
Conditions as well. So we can certainly accept data if they want when they reach their ultimate drawdown, cut it off that year and submit the report after that. But the data is important to have for the report of the drawdown.
Yeah, he keeps monitoring.
Okay.
So the drawdown, I think I heard that the drawdown was stopped at 50 inches because of a call. What I'm also not seeing in the report is...
Well, the other thing that it's noted is 50 inches, however, from what Joanna said, it may have been 5.5 feet because they're trying to draw it down as far as they can, and it doesn't stop, so...
Oh, I thought you said that's why you stopped
She got a
recording.
call when it was at 5.5 feet, not at 50 inches.
Right.
Oh, so we definitely don't have the data.
So we don't have the data, to your point. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that would be important, because
Absolutely.
if the call was at 50 inches, that's very different than at 5.5 feet.
right.
So it's important to know. So that's a reason we need to know it, Bob.
But I don't want to read it.
Well, it's what's required. You need to read the order of conditions, I think. Because there is no other comment. There was a whole series of activities that at the commission's request was added to the management plan that isn't reported on in the report, which, regarding drawdown, which is, trying to get at, how do we get past this 5.5 feet or whatever the magic number is?
I mean, I think it's pretty evident that we're not going to get much past 5.5 feet because once we reach that level, a well gets affected, she gets a phone call, we stop.
So do we have an inventory of the wells that are affected?
We did the survey as requested, yes, we have
And
the wells, and it's the same people every year.
so that's been submitted?
Yeah, you have the survey.
Okay. But there were 5 or 6 activities that were, one activity was a feasibility of alternate water supplies for affected residents. And that's how you could get past 5.5 feet.
But who's going to pay for that? I mean, the alternative
not-
would be deeper wells, who's going to pay for that?
I don't know. I know in Groton, they addressed that issue because they had the same problem
How did they
that
do
we
it?
have. They essentially somehow provided funding. I don't know if it was loans or what it was, to people who had point wells, these stupid, 5-foot point
Who
wells.
provided the funding, the town?
No, it was whoever was running the lake. I forget the name of the lake. But it's not a unique problem with lakes like this where people have
But
gone through the summer.
it's also us spending other people's money.
Well, what fundamentally first it is complying with the lake management plan. A lot of effort was put in the
So
lake management
an
plan.
unfunded mandate.
No, this wasn't a mandate. This was the recommendation this was put in the plan. We didn't request these things. We requested what
I would
activities.
argue with that, Todd.
You would.
Unfortunately, without looking at the cost of updating wells and comparing that with the cost of, eventually, and they have it in this year's annual report, that somewhere they're going to be looking to now start treating for the fan wart. And that's one of the things that the drawdown does control.
Sure.
So you would have to weigh the cost of an annual treatment for fan wart every year with the cost of, a single update of a well.
Well, a single update of a well, for a deep 300-foot well, you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars.
Fortunately, that's not the case on Lake Shirley. Lake Shirley, you can put a gravel pack well for a few $1,000s, and it'll give you over 10 gallons a minute.
And in 2008 to today, we've never ever treated.
And it's an area we shouldn't, we shouldn't make decisions based on cost. We have all kinds of unfunded. Every time we require a study, there's an unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
So we're supposed to be looking after the wetland.
Correct.
And if there's a cost analysis, then we need to pursue
We've
it.
never treated for fan wart, so the cost analysis is zero. We've never used sonar in Lake Shirley, have we, Jonathan?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No.
We've never treated for fan wart, except by drawdown. That's the only treatment we've done for fan wart, so there's been no cost.
And if we don't get ahead of
So
it,
take people's money that donated to a cause and put a new well in this guy's house that doesn't pay, isn't gonna happen. The people aren't going to support that.
I don't think I said that. I said,
Oh, I thought you wanted
what we're supposed to be doing is what's in the order conditions and in the plan.
Well,
Not the order conditions, the plan,
That's
your
a good
plan.
point. Maybe that's a point we need to revisit as we're renewing the order of conditions, because we're putting in unreasonable requirements within the order. It's something to discuss.
How do we know we need to discuss it, because I don't know what's unreasonable yet, because the homework hasn't been done. It's not getting done, and that's why we asked to put it in. They made the recommendation of the activities that they
And
want
that
to
may be
pursue,
something,
and they're not
if you
pursuing.
feel strongly about it, maybe that's something that the Conservation Commission can assist with.
Yes.
But that's something that we should bring up.
Yep.
All right. Next.
I mean,
And
the
we
rest
talked
of it
about-
seemed
we talked
kind of like
about
a
we
summary,
talked about WRS.
Okay.
revisiting some of the things.
Okay. Go ahead, Joanna.
So I would just encourage you to read the rest of these, what I perceive as deficiencies against the order of conditions. I think we've touched on most of them, but there are things in the lake management plan that are not commented on. And there may be activity, it sounds like there is some activity, but it's just not commented on. So in order to keep a complete document and a complete record, essentially everything in the lake management plan should be done or commented on.
Well, I did comment on the wells, and I said upfront, I will not support replenishing wells. But on a good note, Lake Shirley, we redid our order of conditions. They amended our order of conditions to be able to now treat within that dam area.
Oh, really?
They lifted that.
You're talking about the Shirley?
Yes, at the dam. Now we have that, but.
The Shirley order of conditions, what you're
Yes.
talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
And I checked with Matt, and Matt, please, if I'm wrong, correct me, but your order for that mimics whatever Shirley does, so I don't know that if we need to add something, but that's something now, that if there is identified area of treatment, that we would be treating. So.
Okay.
I don't know how to make that happen here, that, because I know the order of conditions, I believe, says that you mimic Shirley's, whatever Shirley's is, you support.
Yeah, I think it referenced the Shirley order, the restrictions on the Shirley order, so if those were lifted, it would be automatic.
Right.
The way it was written.
And I believe with Matt, we checked that, but I
So
just
can we
want
get a new,
to put out.
can we get a copy of the order of conditions then, just so we can make sure, the Shirley order conditions?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure, absolutely.
Yeah, just get it to the office.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Yeah, that was good news for the Shirley residents, they were happy.
Thank you, Dominic.
All right, thank you.
Education as always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Have a great evening. Do we have next steps?
Can I just make a comment?
Yes.
Paula Bertram, 312 Townsend Harbor Road. I just want to caution you on one thing. When you talk about deepening wells, that may or may not be possible. If you have to modify a well, you then have to be into compliance with existing regulations. So to say you can take a point well and deepen it into a gravel-packed well, or that you can make it an artesian well, may not necessarily be the case, because wells may have put in prior to Board of Health regulations, but to change or modify that well may or may not be allowed based on the location, based on the proximity of other wells and other septic systems. So just something to keep in mind when you talk about deepening wells. It may not be that simple.
Sorry, if I said deepening, I didn't mean deepening. It's a new well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah, driving a point further or whatever. I was talking about a new well.
And just to keep in mind, Lake Shirley, because of the small lots and because of the presence of septic systems and the fact that there is no connection to public water, it's a very difficult area to site both septic systems and wells.
Can I just ask a question in the microphone, Paul? Because if I'm understanding, when you worked in Board of Health, you frequently got calls about the shallow wells and losing water.
That's correct.
With drawdown.
That's correct.
It is not something we're making up.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because the minute,
Yep.
and like I said, I would support an 8 drawdown because it does help the fan work. But if I get the phone call, we stop. That's what we've
Understood.
been instructed to do.
Very good. Thank you for coming in.
Do we have next steps? Do we?
Matt?
I'll call Matt.
All right.
Thank you for.
Good night.
Good night. All right.
Take on Gary next. Or we got others?
Yeah, let's bring up Gary first. So Gary Goldrup is here tonight to give us an update on the small town forest and answer some questions. Gary, good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Well, I'll just give you a quick summary. Project's done. We've had a pre-harvest site walk and a post-harvest site walk. We have a nice video available on Lunenburg TV, and be glad to answer any questions, but I'll just give you a quick update. The timber harvest overran in volume and value, so there'll be an additional $5,000 that'll go towards the total revenue of the project, so.
Great.
Yeah, just real
happy to
quick,
do
can
that.
you touch on that? Was that stuff that they cut that was in excess of stuff that you had marked, or was that?
Yeah, well, I marked additional timber based on trees that got damaged or needed to come out, trees on the main skid trail going up to the landing, so.
Okay.
And the utilization was very good. Logger utilized the timber very well.
Okay.
So what I'll do is I'll send Matt a recapitulation statement showing all the volumes by species and their values, and then it'll be wrapped up. We'll send that out next week.
And you're happy with the condition that it's in you know, that the logger left the land in and all that stuff, it's to specs and everything?
Yes, the logging was done very well. The timing of the harvest was excellent in terms of the weather conditions were perfect. We got out of there just before things started to break up. When you go out there, the last thing that really is remaining is we did our post-harvest site walk, was the trails need to be picked up. There's material that was left in the ground through the process of skidding that got frozen and can't pull it out. And so once the entire harvest area, the trails are thawed, we'll be able to get out and get some volunteers and shuffle the debris off to the side.
So that's not something the contractor is going to do, the log?
No, it's just small debris that I wouldn't require to have them pick up. So there is some maintenance that needs to be done. Trails need to be identified. We talked about extending trails, et cetera. The recommendation that I have for the closing it out is putting in a gate, more of a permanent gate where only certain people have a key, access for public safety. The parking lot.
Hey, Gary?
Yes.
Can you actually move closer to the Alexa unit?
Okay.
You know, this thing in the center. Rich can't hear you.
Okay. How's that? Good? All right. Parking lot needs to be graded with the crushed stone that's there, the riprap, and then capped with some type of gravel or stone dust for a good parking lot base. So in terms of success, I was very pleased, very happy with our first project on an experimental basis, and glad to answer any questions. I thought the video was well done. For those who haven't seen it, if you can get an opportunity to look at that, it really explains the nuts and bolts of the project from A to Z, and we were able to have the logger there visit some of the sites that were of concern, the Hemlock Woolly at Delgid, the Blandings Turtle Project. All of those things were addressed in our site walk, so.
Great. If I could, Mr. Chairman, because I was going to bring that up, but not only was this job done very well, I mean, just great job by yourself and the loggers, you know, very little damage that I could see, but that site walk was perfect, and you did an outstanding job on it, and I would encourage everyone to take a look at the video. It's on YouTube. You know, all the right things were said that people were concerned about, and it was very educational, and it was a good job by both you and PAC.
Thank you. And that's basically the whole part of the forest stewardship program is public education. We did a project on an experimental basis, but you did your due diligence by having a pre-harvest site walk, post-harvest, had a management plan that addressed the science, and then we talked a little bit about the art that we did out there. So real fun project. It was, and I look forward to going back in the years to come just to see how it responds. It's going to be really neat to see the changes over time.
Follow through.
Yeah. I'm glad to answer any questions that anyone has.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go, Tom. Tom Bertram, 225 Island Road. I think the cutting, I've been out there a couple times since the cutting. Last time I went there was just a little bit of snow on the ground, so it was like 2 weeks ago, I think. The cutting looks really good. I think the views out there are excellent now. I think they did a good job with the selective cutting. But one of my concerns is, I mean, there's a lot of brush, and I know that was expected, but even navigating the trails, I like to think I'm fairly athletic. It's tough walking out there. There's a lot of volunteer work that's required to make the trails usable again. There's no way you can ride a mountain bike or anything out there as a trail stand.
Yeah. You're talking about trails that were there before?
Existing trails. And the existing trails, I mean, I don't know where the existing trails used to go, and I know those trails pretty well. And I talked to a couple other people, I'm a member of the Lunenburg Snow Riders, and a lot of concerns were brought up at our last meeting that people that go out there all the time don't recognize the trails, and they don't know their way around. So is the Conservation Commission, is part of the plan to go out there and mark the trail system again? Because there's a ton of logging paths, and which one is the correct trail, I don't know. And I was part of the Conservation Commission when we developed the stewardship plan. So I'm just curious what your plan is to recreate the trail system and get that back. for
Yeah, I mean, I
the,
think
the
that was
users.
certainly the intention of the commission was, you know, obviously it's not something that we can do at the moment until some of the trails thaw out and the ice is gone, but yeah, I think that was the intention.
So you're going to go out there, and are you going to mark the trails with Gary to know which ones? Because I don't know by just going out there which trail is which, what the intention was and where the old trails were. There's so many
Yeah, I mean,
logging
I think
paths
that
out there.
there was the intention to mark either the trails that were there or create new trails.
Okay.
That was certainly my intention.
I have a question about that. You know, going forward, you know, if we were to require the logger or yourself before we do a cutting, you know, to mark the existing trails, you know, how much do you think it would cost the commission, you know, in revenue, and really the town in revenue, you know, if we were to ask, you know, the logger, you know, to clean up the trails at the end? Or is that just something no logger's going to do for us? I mean, how does that work? Because it's easy to say, oh, volunteers will go out and do that.
But to actually get the people to go and do it.
But to get someone to actually go out and do that is, I mean, I do a lot of trail work, but I got other projects, you know, I don't want to take on, you know, the small town forest right now. So, I mean, I'm just curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Sure. In order to generate the revenue that you did, you've got to lay out trails in order to extract that timber. What we'll try to do is cross the existing trails at right angles when possible. Obviously, we had to use the main trail to get up to it. So trails over time may have to change based on the need to get the timber out in a feasible manner. So you're going to cross, you're going to destroy, and it takes somebody's time and effort or money to get it fixed the way you want it. So my recommendation is, where do you want that trail to go from here, this point forward? I think you need to identify it, clean it, and extend it. One of my recommendations was to continue right down to Mulpus Road.
My question is about if we were going to do another logging project, you know, is there some way before we start a logging project we could say, oh, this is where the trail is? And at the end of the logging project, we say, oh, well, make sure when you're done in there, you know, you can still navigate that trail. You know, what would that cost us in revenue? I mean, or is that just going to make it so that no one bids on it?
It can be done. It can absolutely be done, as long as there's a way to get that timber out. And in this particular case, there were places where we had to use it or cross it. I could say, once the snow's gone, you should be able to go out there, find it, and reclaim it if you choose to use that particular trail. I know we crossed it in a few places, but if I went out there again, I could find that trail very easily. It was not all destroyed. It's there. You gotta give the snow the chance to wash it away and go out and do a little work. Now, volunteers could do it, or you could take some of the proceeds from the revenue that came in
And hire somebody.
and invest it. It is not a major job in terms of taking a chainsaw, cutting the debris, removing it to the side, putting up trail signs.
Yes, go ahead.
Paula Bertram, 312 Townsend Harbor Road. I did have an opportunity to go on the site walk. I'm very familiar with the property, and...
Paula, can you move a little closer to
Sure,
the...
sorry. As a member of the Lunenburg Snow Riders, I can tell you that last year we did almost 400 hours of trail work, so we're very familiar with trail work. But having been out there, I was astounded at the amount of debris that needs to be moved. I hear you saying that it can be done, and yes, it can be done, but it's a very significant volunteer effort. And one of my concerns is, I want to applaud you for moving forward with the forestry project. I will tell you, the first time I went on site, I was shocked. But I really appreciated Gary's site walk, because after looking at it from that perspective and the health of the forest overall, I think it makes sense to do. But my issue is, I appreciate the revenue that's coming in, and my hope is that money, that you develop a plan for when that parking lot's going to happen, when the trail marking is going to happen, what cost you're willing to put towards removing of that debris and making it a vibrant conservation land again. And additionally, there's other conservation properties that could benefit from that revenue as well, as you know. But one of my concerns is, I know you're saying volunteers, but I have to tell you, having been out there and done a lot of trail work, it's more than I want to tackle. So I'm just curious as to the development of the plan to make it accessible again.
And I will say, that's one of our services. We do that. So if you'd like a proposal, we can give you that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we have been out there, you've been out there, a bunch of us have been out there, and I think we do have to wait until the ground thaws out to actually get in there and look at what actually needs to be done.
Right.
So, I mean,
And I think we try to avoid trails when possible, but when you've laid out a timber harvest sale, the terrain is really the driving force on how you're going to extract that timber. And
I don't really care if you avoid the trails, so long as the trails are still there when you're done.
Yeah.
It's like, I think, so, that's my point of view.
I think it's fair to say that it is still a work in progress. We certainly have no intention of leaving the parcel as it is today. The work is only done a few weeks ago. We're still in the throes of winter. I myself certainly want to get out there. I haven't had the opportunity to see it firsthand, although I think that was a great video that Joe did when she went out on the sidewalk. I encourage you to tell everybody in town to take a quick look at it. It was a great overview of what it is right now. But I know from listening to the comments and talking with the different members, we certainly want to get the trail system back up and usable by the townspeople in as short a time as possible. Whether we use volunteers or put forth some of the revenues that we did get, we certainly want to get that done as fast as we can. Kind of ads properly so people can find them, have maps available online. I look at this as a good starting point. I think we can better utilize the property now where we're putting new trails in and updating the trails that are there. We certainly want to get the parking lot updated as quickly as possible. We certainly want to make sure that we block off access for unwanted motor vehicle traffic getting up in there. So it certainly is a work in progress, and any other suggestions that people may have will certainly not fall on deaf ears, and we want to get the property back up and running and use it as a showpiece for moving forward and doing this in other conservation managed properties in town.
Thanks, Rich.
Tom Bertram, 312 Townsend Harbor Road. Rich, as representing the Lunenburg Snow Riders, we're here to help. We want to help. We want to get out there. I can say firsthand from viewing a number of logging projects in my career as an outdoorsman, this one was done especially well. I was extremely pleased with what was done out there. I would love to work with the Conservation Commission on, helping clean up those trails. I'd like to be involved with that connected trail that we talked about out there, because I have some ideas on that. Years ago, as a kid, we used to run through all those woods, and I know a nice loop we could make for a connector out there. I'll go so far as say that if the commission would supply the materials, we'll get the parking lot graded out, because we have we can do that as long as we get the materials. And my siblings over here and my bride are shaking her head, but we're here to help, so just keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. You guys always step up to the plate when we need it.
Any other comments from the public?
First one is, and it's not a huge undertaking, we have the equipment, but I remember, maybe I misheard or remembering from when we first started this, I thought one of the perks of having the forestry, I thought that we would try to get them to do the parking lot for us when they came in to do the cutting, unless that changed after I left the commission. But I thought at one point we were kind of hoping they would do the parking lot as, part of when they started to do the cutting.
We didn't put that in the prospectus, only that they would cut it.
Okay.
And
it's not a huge undertaking with the equipment if we get the material. And then my second question is, I think it sounds like we got about $46,000 in revenue?
Yep, it's going to be just over 46.
So I guess my question would be, and I thought the intention was to put that back into the trail system, all that money back into the trail system, help develop our conservation land. At least that was my intention when I was on the commission. Is that still the plan? Because it makes me nervous. Tonight there's 2 action items for spending money, or 2 items on the agenda. One was that drone, and there's another one that you haven't talked about for purchasing an ATV or some funding. So I just hope we're not already losing sight of what we're going to spend money on. I thought it was going to go to continuing recreation trails and building bridges, putting in parking lots, doing signs, helping to get more people involved besides just relying on Lunenburg snow riders to do some of this maintenance. So I hope you're not going to take, and the first purchase is going to be something besides upgrading the trail systems in town. So I guess that, just as a resident, I hope you guys stick with the original plan and not spend the money on something else.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on those 2 things. One is the parking lot. It was also my understanding it was just going to get cut. It would create a space, but not ready to park on. So I understand that from the beginning. But I absolutely agree with you. It was my understanding, at least I was working on the understanding that, maybe not all, but certainly the majority of the money that was raised would be pumped back into the land. And I appreciate your comments on the trails and things here. I even before this was done, it was clear that we needed work done on the other trails, just defining the trails. So hopefully this money would be used for some of that, for getting other trails marked and properly managed. So I absolutely agree that would be my goal, would be to reinvest the majority, for sure, of that money into improving the conservation areas and usefulness of them, and having the maps that we never have, and getting things online, and those. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, you actually just hit the nail on the head that I wanted to talk about, is in looking at, there's several posts, I don't know if you guys are familiar with some of the social Facebook pages, but there's a number of comments from people asking for where are the trails, and where can I hike, and where can I bring a stroller, and people don't know the trail systems in Lunenburg. And I think one of the things that I hope, and it's not a huge amount of money, but will go into mapping. And just an FYI, Montechusett Regional Trail Coalition is offering to a regional map, and they are looking for data from communities to incorporate maps, and they're printing maps. So it may be worth following up with them, but I hope that some of the revenue will go into publicizing our trails and making our townspeople aware of where they are.
Sure.
And you guys have some great maps that started.
Yeah, we've got a good base.
I would just make one recommendation on going forward with the trails at Small Town Forest.
Yep.
Whoever would choose to identify that trail and get it to the northwest corner where we have made access that you never had access before, if someone wanted to identify that, I could actually give you an estimate to just go in there. It wouldn't take, for us, it's not a big job. And if it's a time constraining thing for you as volunteers, I can give you a proposal for it. But I need to know where you would like to have it.
Yeah, I think that's something that come spring we need to sit down and talk about, and maybe have some people come and take a look at.
And then the other thing is just identification markers that
trail markers
would be, yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Mr. Chair,
Katie.
if you don't mind, just quickly, I'm a new member of town, so I'm not very familiar with, going off what you were saying, Paula, I'm not very familiar with a lot of the town properties. I think I've only really been to the nature center, and that's it. So having maps online, even little informational pages, because like, I don't know the locations of any of these. I go on the website, I try to find out, and I really can't. So I think that would be beneficial using some of this money towards that. And again, I think a lot of the townspeople would benefit for it, from sure.
Great, thank you. Gary, thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed working on the properties.
Well done.
That's called PC Draft, but we have GIS, so we use
All right,
both.
we're gonna move on to
Thank you.
violations. Matt, you want to bring us up to speed on which violations we're going to address tonight?
Okay, so under current business?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, 571, as you know, I'm just keeping it on the agenda until next couple of months when it grows.
Yep.
307 Townsend Harbor,
Matt, can you come over by the Alexa? Hold on, Rich.
Say a magic word.
Rich, you still there?
No, he's gone.
When you said Alexa, hold.
He's back.
Alexa, resume.
What do you want to play?
Alexa, you realize we are being recorded.
That's fine.
No one made it this long. Alexa, cancel.
Canceling.
Just for that song. Alexa, fire photon torpedoes.
Oh, gosh.
I'll have to redial.
I think we should invest some of that trail money in a Polycom phone.
Wait a minute, it didn't fire. Alexa, fire photon torpedoes. I gotta look up Rich's name. Alexa, dial a number.
Which phone number, contact, or device do you want to call?
978-479-2384.
From whose number? Matthew, Sarah, or Irene?
Matthew.
978-479-2384.
Good thing no one knows Rich's phone number.
Jesus.
You back, boss?
Hey, Matt.
You back? All right.
Can I borrow your agenda?
Of course.
Okay, so, 307 Townsend Harbor Road, that's continued for the next meeting.
Okay.
654 Mass Ave, I put in an inquiry to the engineer as to where his engineering is. Thinking we should do the enforcement order thing for the next meeting if I don't have anything, because this is just gonna drag on. 46 Fire Road 12. We have the request for determination on file. He's out with the flu, obviously, so that'll be for the next meeting. Emerald Place Beach Erosion, they've been issued an enforcement order telling them to come to the next meeting with a plan. Under new business, the ATV purchase. The police department has been looking to purchase an ATV with a, what they call, it's a medical attachment, so that this has happened with them before. People that get injured in the woods, they can basically have something to take them out.
Yep.
The unit is about 20 grand. They're not asking for like 20 grand. They're just asking if we'd be willing to maybe put like about, 5 or 6 grand towards the purchase.
Excuse me, Matt, I'm confused because they have, I think, $18,000 in the capital request for this year's budget.
Yeah,
For that machine, so why do they need any more money?
We were asked by the police department to bring it to the Conservation Commission to see if you guys would be willing to help out with some of the funding.
Were we asked by the police or by the town manager?
Both.
Okay.
Instead of the capital funding or in addition to?
Yeah, but I haven't been privy to. Go ahead, Rich. I'm sorry.
See if we would use any of our funding from the forest harvest to help in the purchase of the ATV, as one of the large uses of the ATV will be in patrolling in the conservation land. We try to cut down on unwanted motor vehicle traffic and other activities on our property.
I'm going to comment on that real quick. I think that my personal opinion of this is that the town should be responsible for buying it. Personally, I don't have an issue putting, if there was a difference, to make up a difference in the capital plan, $5,000 or $6,000. I think my personal opinion is completely appropriate. The times that this has been used to move patients out of the Cowdrey lot, conservation land. It's been used to fight forest fires in Pleasant Street. It's been the ATV that we have now that needs to be replaced, is not suitable for enforcement on conservation land. So I think that it does have conservation, it's going to be used mostly on conservation land. So I think that, yeah, it's not directly towards trail maintenance, but if, a portion of this money went towards that, it's going to be used for conservation purposes. So I think it is appropriate in my opinion. But I certainly don't think we should be spending half of the money that we just got for the forest harvest on this piece of equipment.
No, I totally agree with that.
What were they asking for us to fund it? They were just asking to see if we were amenable to funding a portion of it. And I couldn't have said it better, Ken, the description of the need for the ATV. I certainly think that the policing and the patrolling of the town properties, especially if we make them more accessible, is definitely a need. So I would not be opposed to funding a portion of the purchase of the ATV.
I guess I'm come back though. Certainly, I've been in 2 meetings on the budget that this has been on the table, and it's in the capital plan. It's one of the items that were recommended for $18,000. I believe it was $18,000. And there certainly was no mention that wasn't enough to buy it, that they needed some other money from somewhere else. I'm a little,
I don't know,
concerned here that, I mean, I'd have to go on the chiefs because he was there and presented it, that the $18,000 buys it and it's in the capital plan. So I'm not sure what's being asked of us.
To the capital plan figures.
Personally, I can, at this point, I can neither commit to supporting or not supporting it. I'd like to see a formal proposal from the police for funding from the Conservation Commission if we wanted to make an informed decision on it.
Yeah, that's more than reasonable.
Tom Bertram again, 225 Island Road. I'm also not opposed to the ATV, but as a resident, I would hope that the Conservation Commission would look at your own needs before donating money. Look at what it's going to take to get the small town forest back operational and usable for the town before you start donating money to other departments. Especially considering this is the first time you guys have ever had money in a long time to actually use for the trails and actually make some good on the conservation and other land. You can look at purchasing other conservation land or improving it. So I think you should look at true conservation efforts before an ATV, which is something that is something that's frowned upon. ATVs. I know it's for good uses, saving people, but.
Sir, did you have a comment?
I did. Thank you. Yeah, Matthew Allison, 305. I was on capital planning this year, and it was in fact fully funded.
Okay. Perfect.
Thank you.
Let's see.
Permanent extension?
Well, look, if I could just go into my action items real quick, just to get this stuff out of the way. 183 Hemlock, I have been down there. He has moved the stuff back. The they call the shoreline back, and he's actually covered at the top right now. So
Okay.
he should be due to actually get that started at any time. 811 Chase Road, I actually had a builder come in that is looking to finish off the project. The only thing he was actually looking to do was a third lot, and I was kind of discouraging it because he'd never meet the riverfront standards. 101 Pleasant Street, 72 and 76 Mass Ave, now owned by the same entity. That person was actually looking to amend his forestry permit to go through, make a common drive and go through. Unfortunately, there is a boatload floodplain, a cold water fishery, and a boatload of wetlands that would have to be crossed, as well as getting a DOT permit. I just don't see that really as being viable, but I'm keeping an eye on it to make sure that nothing happens. Reservoir Road, I have a notice of none that went out to 91 Reservoir. That was based on a call I got from Commissioner Jones. Apparently that was the house that we had allowed the pool to go in because it was on an area that was already altered. Well, they went out past the area that was supposed to be untouched and on one side started cutting trees down. There wasn't a lot of them, it was just a small area, we caught it early, shut it down. 70 Oak Ridge Road is, the house is still going, but it's at a snail's pace. I've been out there to look, I have pictures of the erosion protection, it's going up quite well, but it's going at a snail's crawl. But winter had to have taken part of that, because that hill was frozen pretty good. So.
Matt, are they going to be able to get the wall at the lake in this year? Is there activity there or no?
There's no activity there right now, but they're gonna have to update me when the weather starts to break and they can do site work again. So.
Well, the lake's starting to come up, I was just wondering, it's
Yeah,
got to
it
be
was
too
just
late
right
this
now, I
year.
wouldn't do any work over there because it's probably pretty muddy.
Okay.
The Pleasant Street Youngs Road land gift update. I'm still looking at some more information on this, but based on my talks with town council and talks with the chairman, I don't know if the chairman wants to weigh in on this one. My take on it is that we just don't accept it.
It's swampland.
It's swampland. There are, in our estimation, there could be some 21 issues. When our council talked to Mr. Erb, he was rather dubious in some of his responses. I mean, not evil, just kind of avoided questions.
Yeah.
Rich, do you have anything you wanted to add? Hey, Rich, you still there?
Yeah, yes, I am. Yeah, the biggest problem I have with this piece of property is it is the exact, the dimensions are exact with the edge of the swamp and the streams running through there. So the land is not developable as it is now. In talking with the town's attorney, there were concerns of past history and use on that property or in very close proximity to that property. So we could be at some point possibly opening ourselves up to liability if something is found to have entered or polluted the property. So the opinion that the town's attorney had was, if it's already protected and not developable, why would we want to open ourselves up to any possibility of liability in the future?
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too that we did ask was, what if the gentleman that owns it retaliates by just forfeiting his taxes? And the response from town council basically was that it's worth extremely little money, and there's no reason why the town has to take something by tax title. It can elect not to.
Yeah.
Exactly. The town does not get liability unless the town takes possession of the property. So just in non-payment of taxes does not obligate the town to take the property. It can just sit out there in perpetuity, but there is liability or a current owner if something is found out of there.
Right.
842 rear map?
842 rear, Mr. Popham should be starting to go out on the site now because the ice and the snow have cleared up. So that's the last I was hearing from him was that he was just waiting for the weather to break, because he couldn't see anything with the ice on the ground. So,
All right.
Hey, I must have got cut off for a second. What was the, how did we label with the ATV?
We didn't take any action on it, Rich.
Okay.
We did.
More information, or what are we looking for to?
There was a comment made by a planning board member that was involved with the capital planning that basically it was fully funded by the capital plan, and, you know, honestly, I don't think anybody here, you know, if it's funded, we don't really need to take any action on it, I don't think.
Okay, no, I just didn't hear that, and yeah, I mean, if it is fully funded, then I suppose the request would be taken back at that point.
Right. Yep.
So we should just leave it open. I'll just follow up quick with Adam in the morning just to see.
Very good.
So we have an extension permit. Mr. Anderson is here from Hannigan Engineering. They've got some minor changes that they're gonna make to the plan. It's actually less impact. So I was gonna ask the commission to just go to the sidewalk with the plans to take a look, but he's been sitting here, so I don't know if you guys just wanna let it go from the plans, and I can type up the permit, subject to any special conditions.
This is for Tri-Town Landing?
Tri-Town Landing.
Okay.
For enforcement order, and that's a win right now. Here's a couple 11x17s of the plan.
If I don't get you guys
just as a little history, this used to be the old drive-in theater. Back in,
I hope I don't get you guys sick.
Permitting went through the planning board and conservation commission.
Sorry, I'm gonna breathe all over Matt.
The extension permit was granted back in 2012. Due to the Permit Extension Act, it is valid until July of this year.
Speaking of the light.
Sorry, Rich. The extension permit was granted back in 2012. Due to the Permit Extension Act, the permit actually expires in July of this year. Like most of these projects, during this time frame, the recession hit kind of hard, and construction went at a snail's pace on most of these projects. So we're currently going through the planning board process to get the site plan modified. Before you is a couple 11x17s. Sheet 1 is a red line outline of what was originally approved under the permit back in 2012. As part of the construction, we're abandoning one of the buildings, making green space for the residents. And ultimately, we're combining two of the buildings into one, as you can see in the center of the project. Again, the red outline is just the limit of the buildings back then. The major impacts to the wetlands and the buffer zones and everything like that is along the actual 30-foot no-touch zone, along the, I guess you can call it the southerly side of the property. Originally, there was a fair amount of grading and pavement in that 30-foot buffer. As part of this project, we're going to actually be pulling back and reducing the amount of total impervious.
I'm sorry, I can never find the 30-foot buffer.
Yeah, on top here.
That, okay. The red?
No, there's a...
The dotted line next to the red.
Yeah. As part of this modification, we're actually removing a fair amount of the pavement due to parking reductions. So as the plan stands, we're actually losing about 2,200 square feet, a little bit less of impervious area within the total envelope of the project. So it's very much an improvement over the alternative. But as the plan stands right now, we are proposing to do these modifications. Like I said, we are going through planning and getting those permits put in line. But we would be requesting the extension permit on this, just so we can get the construction going. We're hoping that by summer we can get the construction rolling. The last phase was in 2015, and it only took them a few months to get this up and running. So once they start, they don't stop.
Yeah, that last building, I mean...
It went up like nothing.
Number 7 went up.
Oh, yeah.
Fast.
But that's the general gist of the project. We're just hoping that we can get the extension permit and these minor modifications all wrapped up into one and under the extension permit.
And Matt, you wanted to put this on the site walk schedule prior to this meeting on March 7th?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, we haven't been out there in ages.
Yep.
And I figured you guys might want to have a look at it and seeing is,
And just, I was out there a few weeks ago, back when I started looking at this again. Much of the site has been graded to, according to the plans roughly, and most of the site has been stabilized.
Okay.
My understanding was that way back when the construction was first being done, most of the restoration and replication areas were taken care of. I'm still looking into that, but if you were to go into the replication and restoration area near the southerly portion of the property, it's pretty much complete. They even dug out a little area of that area, section in order to get that extra pipe in. So they're trying to mitigate as much as possible. So the amount of work that would have to be done is very minimal.
Okay. Any questions from the commission?
I don't have any.
I understand Commissioner Pease has to leave. It's true.
Oh, jeez.
It's getting late. It's getting late. All right, so we'll have you on the schedule for the site walk prior to the 7th. What's the date on that? Is that the
March,
3rd?
the March 7th meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, what's the date of the site walk? Is it the 2nd or the 3rd?
Third.
Third, yeah.
Okay. So we'll see you on the 7th.
Great. Very good.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Has everyone here had a chance to review the minutes for January 6th?
Did I, Matt?
So long ago.
What?
Did I review those?
I'm sorry.
The January 6th minutes?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I did? Thank you.
Yep. Ken, did you review them?
Yeah, I'm all set with them.
All right. So I will accept a motion to approve the minutes for January 6th.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and with that, do we have any additional comments from the public? Any additional comments from the commission?
I don't have any right now, no.
So I will accept a motion to adjourn, and our next meeting will be on March 7th, 2018. Do I have a...
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Shut her down.